Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll call the July Board of Architecture Review and Planning Board meeting into session. Can we get a roll call of who's present?
Certainly. Joseph Clark,
Here.
Walter Ludlam,
Here.
John Fry,
Here.
Michael Baldati,
Here.
Jeffrey Gasparo,
Here.
Stuart Gahan, Corporation Counsel,
Here.
Jesus Lopez,
Here.
and Brian Hildebrand from Keller Fitness.
Pretty well, too. So we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes. We're talking about our special counsel catch up. So feel free to relax for a few minutes. We'll be back. You don't have to leave. The lawyers need to go. We're back. I hope the long commercial break was entertaining enough. But so we will continue the public hearing that we started last month for Plateau Associates at 30 North Water Street. We have received updated comments from our Environmental Advisory Council with some statements and a request that they have more time to adequately address in more detail some of their concerns with respect to effluent, discharge, et cetera, detention, and the stream. Let's see. We did get also comment from our Historical Review Commission with respect to an engineering analysis independent of the ones we received already to determine whether the building was in some way movable. And then for those of you who missed the work session on TV, we did have a work session a couple of weeks ago where we reviewed a number of points with respect to leads, with respect to recreation, and with respect to the view shed that would be determined here. I don't believe we had any representative from the school board at that point in time.
Not at the work session.
Okay, and we're expecting, I think, updated information perhaps from the school, and I see the superintendent. I'm not sure. Okay, so with that being said, I think there were some questions that we asked at the work session. Did you have a plan tonight to review those? View shed, a little more detail on leads, the recreation, et cetera?
Good evening, Michael Zarin, Zarin Steinmetz, on behalf of the applicant, Plateau Associates. I believe, Mr. Chairman, we included that in our July 17th submission. We responded to all the comments that were raised regarding view sheds, lead, Corbucky Preserve. We included an additional drawing. I believe, with respect to the board, I think we have, at this juncture, submitted and responded and provided the board with the sufficient information to make a secret findings and to close the secret hearing. With respect to several issues that I know may be raised in the environmental conservation, which we have not seen, and the other submission, I assume that we will have another session with respect to site plan, and we'll be prepared to address any of those comments at that time. But we believe that with respect to the submission that we made July 17th, we answered and responded to all the issues raised at the work session and the public comments that we had received to date.
So are you actually prepared to take us through what you submitted on the 17th?
We did not know that that's what you wanted. We assumed that you had it before you, and if you had any questions or issues, you would raise them. So we did not prepare a,
Okay. Oh, and I also, did we get back comments from the fire department?
My understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that the fire department did meet with the engineer today. From the email that I saw, there was one issue with regard to the hammerhead, and there were some questions with regard to some of the standpipes. But I think overall, the fire department was in agreement with the plans that were presented.
yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe with respect to the three issues that were covered in the Kellett Sessions memo, and frankly, we assumed that that was the memo that we would be relying upon. As Mr. Khan said, we had a good meeting with the fire department, and they just raised some minor site plan issues that we will respond to in the site plan. We made clear that with respect to the question as to the road illustration, which we've included, we do not have a 10-foot terrace, and that's why it's not shown in the rendering. And we will be meeting with the Army Corps next week to determine what, if any, permits are going to be required from them with respect to the stream. So, again, we believe that we've provided you with the adequate information for you to make findings on SECRA, as well as to proceed with the site plan, and hopefully we can complete that at the next session.
All right. So with that, members of the board, any questions, comment?
So we had a conversation at the work session about LEED, and just to go back, our law provides a density bonus if the applicant can achieve LEED gold, and then it has a provision that says the planning board may modify the LEED certification down to silver if the applicant can demonstrate the particularities of the development warrant modification due to site constraints or financial hardships that are directly related to the development of the project. And so in the new material that we've been provided, there's a statement, the applicant, again, this is similar to what was there before, maintains that it cannot definitively commit to LEED gold, citing potential financial costs and hardship. And then also what's newly been added is a list of the 53 credits that it can achieve to definitively achieve LEED silver. This mirrors what was in the appendix in the LEED worksheet. But I think in order for, in my view, for the planning board to allow the applicant to feedback here.
Shut off some of your other microphones. Yeah, continuous.
Okay. To depart down from gold to silver, there has to be a demonstration of the factors that you cannot achieve. And so what's been added to the SFEIS is a list and elaboration of the factors you do plan to achieve. But I think what we need to do under the law is look at, or you need to show us why you can't achieve additional factors that would get you to gold. And so I think what I'm looking for is not a list. I mean, I think it's important to understand what factors you plan on achieving, but what factors under the LEED certification are causing a financial hardship, or what factors about the site are unique that those additional factors cannot be achieved.
Okay, we took that issue to heart, and I think the applicant in the SFEIS made a commitment to go for gold, and we believe that the items that we hope to achieve would get us gold. I think the wild card here is that for any of you that have gone through the process, until you're before the actual LEED certifying, you don't know how they're going to apply the discretion. And then we'll have a better idea at that point, if for any reason they find that certain items are not, we haven't satisfied those standards, then we'll have a better idea of why we haven't reached the goal. But as far as, and then you'll have a better idea of what those exact items are and what the reasons that we didn't qualify for a credit for those in obtaining the goal. But until we go, the number of items that we listed that we are going in with and we are committing to, subject to the analysis of the lead certifier, will get us gold. So I don't think it's fair to ask us for any more, because it is a discretionary process. We are making that commitment to go for gold, and I think, to your point, I think you can cover yourself in the condition when you write the condition for our site plan approval, which I think this is. I think we've been open and transparent and disclosed all the information to this board that you need to make a determination for on our site plan. But I think we satisfied the secret standard. We've laid it out. We're committing to go for gold. And, you know, any condition to the site plan can be written accordingly. I mean, I think we're complying with the spirit of the meeting that we had. We understand and appreciate what the statute provides, and we're going for gold. And again, it'll only be if the items that we have listed, certain items and points, in the discretion of the lead analyst, for some reason reject those.
So it's not really a financial hardship or factors unique to the site. What you've said is basically it has to do with the discretion of the lead certification process. But what I'm looking for is what you have 53 factors, you say, and I believe in good faith you would attempt to have all of those factors met to get you to 53 points, which would be within silver. But what other 7 points to get to gold would you in good faith undertake? And then it might be up to the discretion of the lead process.
Can I suggest this, because it is an uncertain process when we get, if that you could write a condition that allows this dialogue to continue as we go before the certified, beyond, yeah, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nick Spolatis with Plateau Associates. The LEED certification process is a complicated and convoluted one. Mr. Fry can certainly share with you such experiences he may have with the LEED certification. What we have done, what we have presented to you is a matrix that identifies those points, those credits that we believe we will definitely achieve, a number of other points, other credits that we are likely to achieve, other credits that are unlikely to be achieved, and the remaining credits that cannot be achieved. We've given you that analysis. That is, in my experience, looking at other proposals that have been put before this board, where they have said, here's the yes and here's the no. We've given you more granularity, providing you the yes and the maybes. The maybes, as Mr. Zarin has indicated, and even the yes in many cases, are at the discretion of the USGBC, U.S. Green Building Council, to determine whether or not you have indeed achieved that requirement. My reading of the code states that an applicant does not have to achieve LEED certification. It simply has to present information that achieves the equivalent of LEED certification. If you look at the definitely and the maybes, we far exceed LEED Gold. So to the extent of meeting the code, I believe our application absolutely has met the code requirement for LEED Gold. What we have done is we have gone further and made a specific commitment to achieve LEED certification. When we expect to receive at least LEED Silver, probably LEED Gold, but at least LEED Silver, we will be only the second multifamily community in the village of Ossining to have achieved LEED certification. So I think that should be taken into account by this board, far and above any of the other developments that have been approved over the last 5 years, none of whom have LEED certification. So to your point, why could we not achieve? We haven't said we will not achieve it. You're misreading the analysis. The analysis says that we are likely to achieve, but we cannot guarantee that. So what you're asking us to guarantee that we will get to LEED
I'm not asking you
Gold,
to guarantee, just
Then-
with all due respect, I'm just saying identify the factors that you would in good faith, because you've got a pool of likelies that are
All my-
23 points.
all of
And
it-
so what, and you just need 7 to get to 60, so
Exactly.
could you identify 7 that you would in good
if
faith?
you look at the matrix, you will see the additional points. And I don't recall the exact number, but we far exceed the 60 points that are required.
Well,
On the maybes.
but I think what you were saying is, look, we, as you said, we are committing to go after those 23 additional likely points. And that would get us to, for us to, we feel that we have an excellent chance to get 7 of those 23. If we get 7 of those 23, we hit gold status.
So if you're gonna commit to attempt to go after the other 23 points and actually implement those design features, et cetera, into the construction, then that's what I'm looking for.
Yes.
We have made that commitment.
Yes, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
then we had a miscommunication. We've made that commitment. We don't know, as I was trying to state, to what extent the certification council will consider that complying and grant us those points, but that's why they're likely.
So you commit to
Including those
the
features.
additional 23, okay.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry. That would have saved a lot of time.
Sorry, I'm thinking.
Excuse me?
Said I'm thinking.
Okay.
I'm off. So just to be clear, there's 53, and then there's another 23 that come in various stages of likelihood. The design that you're going to bring forward will incorporate all of those elements.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Jeff, is that? Then it becomes up to
Maybe,
the,
I don't know, John, you might have more expertise in this area.
Well, I don't know if I have more expertise, I have experience. And so I can share my experience. And I feel like you've answered the question to a certain extent, but let me just share what. So in a particular instance, for example, with County of Westchester, client commits to LEED Platinum as part of their lease. So there is no option other, in their minds, to get the terms of the lease. So the strategy from the design team side is you've got to build in buffer, because as everybody's articulated here, you're subject to review, and there are no guarantees for many of the points categories. So you build in a buffer. And am I understanding that that's what your answer is? You're building in the buffer?
Correct. By going for 23 points, we're hoping the buffer is that of those 23, we can accomplish 7. And that gets its goal.
Right, and if I understand Jeff's question, now, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jeff, you're looking for the 23 to be identified specifically as the buffer points that give you, that likely provide the additional points between silver and gold. Is that what your question is?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little bit confused because,
well, I don't understand.
no, I want, this is for them.
Excuse us for one second.
Yeah.
So while they're-
Yeah, I guess my point is the code says if there's a hardship to the applicant or something unique about the development site, but what we have in the written document, there's no relating of anything unique about the site or cost of those additional 23. And so, but what I just heard was the applicant was going to commit to implementing all of those 23 additional categories as features of the development. And so then I'm still not sure why the language of the document speaks of hardship. If they are, I think really what we're just talking about is what happens in the end, discretion of the certification process, they don't meet gold. And so they're looking for some safety.
Let me just restate. First of all, the buffer that we are seeking is, we are willing to implement each of those measures to try to get to 7. If we get to 7 and gold by only implementing 12 of those, then that would be our commitment.
Okay.
So the buffer
That's different.
is, we're ready to add on as we need to get to 2023. My understanding is, and I think that's fair, and I think it's reasonable, and I think it's consistent with the code, and it's certainly consistent with, you know, how you've treated some of the other larger projects in the village. So we are making that commitment, and if you want to, in your conditions, agree on language that refines that commitment and makes it very clear and explicit, then we're open to it, and we'll work with you in that respect.
So I think what derailing this right now is the word, you know, hardship, and it doesn't sound like there's hardship. It sounds like you're gonna do this. If it takes all 23 of the extra point, you're gonna get the goal.
The hardship is not just financial. The hardship is also that you are at the discretion of the U.S. Green Building Council as to what points they will award. It's conceivable that some of the 53, USGBC may come back and say, you know what, we don't agree with you. But if I were to look at the proposal that Hudson Step had presented to you not too long ago, they presented to you only emulating 60 points within the LEED certification standard that would have achieved LEED Gold. Under no circumstances were they guaranteed, if they had actually submitted for submission for certification, that they would have gotten all 60 of those points. Had they lost even 1 point, they would not get LEED Gold.
Well, you've only given us 53.
We have given you 53 yes, that we believe very strongly are achievable. We've also given you 20 plus that are likely. In a similar situation to Hudson Step, we are presenting you with 75 points. Good enough for LEED Platinum. Under no circumstances do we expect that USGBC would grant every one of those points if we sought to achieve every single credit. That's not the point.
We also,
Not to derail this, let's try to take Hudson Step out. Hudson Step was a series of unique circumstances which merged 2 projects, and the density, the LEED calculations, assessments, and discussion weren't directly tied to the density calculations because those came from 2 previous projects that were merged together. That was a completely different context.
I guess the other thing that we would ask some indulgence and acknowledgement of, I mean, we have committed to going for certification. And as you know, and I can tell you from my experience, probably 90% of the projects I work with, very few of the applicants commit to the actual certification. What they commit to certifiable. So you eliminate that more complex, uncertain step.
And expensive.
And costly step. And I think that that's something that is a credit and a amenity and that we're giving to the board, or we're committing to, and I think that deserves a certain amount of acknowledgement in the calculation here. But again, we will make a best faith effort to get the goal. I think there's just a little bit of uncertainty in the process, and that's all you're hearing. And I'm sure that could be accommodated in conditions to the site plan, written into conditions. But for the purposes of SECRA, I think we've provided you with all the information that you need for SECRA purposes for tonight. for tonight's purpose.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to think about it some more, but I think that what Jeff is suggesting is we might need a language change. That sort of, one, it's really not a hardship, it's a discretion question. There's no hardship. I think that's the first thing that threw us off the rail. They're either gonna say yes or no, you're gonna design it, and they're gonna say, I don't agree. That's not the same as there's a financial, economic, site plan, et cetera, hardship in making this happen. So, you know, it's a judgment call, as you say, versus.
With all due respect, Mr. Clark, it is a hardship. The certification process itself is likely to cost over $100,000. It's a commitment that nobody else has made, and we're making it. The hardship is that the presentation, the design that's being presented to USGBC for its review, the efforts that we will undertake to strive for LEED Gold, to the extent that in their discretion they say no, the hardship is we're stuck. They've said no, we're not going to get that credit. To be able to come back and redesign the program to be able to achieve that is going to be a financial hardship. It's going to cost more.
Which we will not know until we're before the certification process, and we know and we understand which ones are accepted, which weren't, why they weren't accepted. And
I don't want to flog this notion, because I think we have to move on, I suggest, but I think we're still stumbling, or at least I am, in terms of language and syntax here. If the requirement built, cast into the code, into our code, to achieve the density that you're proposing, requires the component of the LEED certification, I don't think it's fair to call that a hardship. It's an element of meeting the code, just like you meet all of the other. It's like saying the setbacks are hardship.
let's do this then. We commit to a gold certifiable project, and we will provide you with 60 items that we will commit to, or 60 points, or, you know, that gets us to gold, and we believe meet the LEED certifiable standards. That's what most applicants do, and it's certainly a more certain process, less expensive, less onerous, and under those conditions, we will commit to a gold level. Gold LEED.
Okay, so we've got some.
We're going to continue to move around with them.
So that's it on the lead for me, if anyone else has.
So speaking for myself, some time was dedicated to talking about the appropriateness of the development with regard to its relation to addressing waterfront uses. I know that we've had a planner, intern, I guess, review that. That sort of came out, and I don't know if we have the answer yet. I mean, I don't know if there's been any kind of sort of updated answer for that. I mean, I know our responses from several years back are somewhat dated, so, you know, my concern would be, again, the appropriateness of the development as it relates to meeting the outlines or the requirements of, you know, the waterfront development district, whether there's a restaurant or some other thing that encourages waterfront activity. So, you know, again, we don't need to belabor that point tonight, but I still think, like, personally, I haven't really heard the answer yet that says to me, you know, wow, I think that's really now fits in with our waterfront development, you know, zoning. So.
I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, go ahead.
The view sheds.
No, hey.
It was your
No, that's okay.
And maybe
They
this
put me
is,
last for a reason.
What's that?
maybe this is, again, we're stumbling over language and intent. So we talked about, Joe talked about specifically a view shed study from the easterly side of the building, and maybe I'm missing something here. So we see the existing views on this drawing. right, that describe it as the view shed. But I think more typically, the view shed study is meant to say, here's the existing view, and here's what the view will look like when the building is in the view. Am I missing that?
We have those four views from the east, west, north, and south. That was just something that showed the views from the
Right, but-
conservation easement.
Right,
and
but
how
I
they
think these are the
impact.
views that Chairman Clark asked for, right?
The views that we provided dealing with the views from the conservation easement were the views that,
But with the
additional
building
views
in,
that were
right,
asked
right.
for at our work session of the meeting.
So can everybody talk this up?
In the past, we have provided the views that I think you've asked for, or you,
Well, no, I think we're
Reference.
still stumbling around one another. Here's the existing view, these two specific views that Mr. Clark asked for. And they're both existing conditions. Correct?
correct.
And, again, I don't want to put words in Mr. Clark's mouth, but I think the intent was, what will those views be with the building in those views?
So I think this is actually not what I was looking for, but it sort of does. When we met the other night, at some point, the conservation area goes back here, and there's a property line.
Yes.
From that point, west, what do I see?
Trees.
Trees existing
I can
and
see the building.
trees,
Existing, we're not taking any trees down in the conservation
and
easement.
trees,
So I'm not gonna see the.
and trees built.
So that's
You'll s-
what,
Yeah, a portion of the
That's all I asked for. Show me what I'm gonna see, because as near as I can tell, if I'm up here on the plateau someplace, there's a portion of this building that's gonna be visible. Right?
absolutely.
And that was my question. What am I gonna see from there? Because that's what the view shed is.
So
Right?
then,
What I saw there is exactly what's there today. There's no building.
you mean, of the pictures, of the
That doesn't
photos?
tell me anything. This doesn't really tell me anything.
We tried
About the
to,
future.
we tried to illustrate with the hatched areas that would show where you would see the building and where you would see the existing condition, which is that photo that's in that plan. There's densely, it's trees. And for a portion, the southerly portion of the conservation easement, you're gonna see the building as you stand behind it. I don't think a picture.
That is the question. Because the question is, how much of the view is what, right?
Half of the easement.
And so
The
that.
picture's not gonna, right?
Well, show it to me. That's all I asked. I asked-
But isn't that
No, this doesn't-
discernible
No.
from this?
No, it isn't. Because if I look at this, I'm presuming this is the west. I'm standing east, right?
Looking west, looking at the
And I'm
river.
looking clear through, and someplace in there, that little white spot, there could be a building. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea whether this whole image is filled or not. I don't know.
this is not unusual.
I'm not saying it's unusual, but you're standing at a point, either you're standing behind a building or you're not standing behind a building.
I'm just imagining that I'm the uphill neighbor. And what am I gonna see today that I don't see later? Not that it changes my point of view of anything, it's just it was a question and we should ask. I mean,
But what, Chairman, I guess I'm confused. We thought that the view sheds that you asked for were the views from the conservation easement. This is what these
so
show.
This is what, well,
And then, I think you said, and then you just switched to it, and you said, but what if I'm the neighbor?
no. So let's go to your map. This is simple. So this is the conservation area.
Correct.
I'm standing there, looking this way. What do I see?
Here's the building.
Oh, I have no idea how to get to that.
What do I see standing here?
That's in my mail.
Right here, any place here.
Isn't that this? You
No.
see
Well, I think that's what I
trees
see
before you
today.
see the building.
But will I see the building? That's the question. Because I'm trying to gauge
But what trees you
how,
don't see?
when I look at your
Pointing to
side
that image.
elevation, right? I see about 3-4 stories beyond where the
I email
plateau
it to you.
stops.
These don't see over the building, I think is what he's saying, right?
I can't, I don't have
Am I
access to
looking
my
over
email
the
down
building? When
here.
I'm at that point, am I looking over the building or through the building?
The only time you're looking over the building is in this blue area, at a certain elevation. So the building elevation height is about 81.
Joe, did you ask this question of Harbor Square?
Hold on.
Did you?
Peter,
And you approved it? No,
Please,
no, the
please.
village board approved
Go
it.
ahead.
so trying to answer your question, you want to know basically what do you see standing in this
That's all it
conservation?
is. Yeah.
So the only time you're going to see over the building is when you're at an elevation higher than the building.
And that's where?
And that's in the color,
blue.
the blue area.
Otherwise, you're seeing
Otherwise,
either
you're
trees
seeing-
or building.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. So.
Can we ask some more questions about this image? About this image? So just can we walk through some of what's depicted here?
Sure.
And what was, I don't know, if they were, it's just trying to pull.
So, can we pull up the, you can pull up the, on the PDF?
Where,
I can send it to you, Jamie.
I know, but email's upstairs.
They'll have this.
Sorry.
They'll have it.
Okay, so let's take you through the colored areas in the conservation.
And I just have a question before you, just like
Sure.
definitionally, when you say view, what do you mean by view? A view of east?
Trees, it's, well, yeah, so what we try to do is the view is we try to use some directional arrows as to what you'd be looking at, and the view in any area near water would be to look at the water.
So you're saying an unobstructed view west of
I was
river line? or something?
Careful not to say unobstructed, because there
There
are
are
major
lower
trees in the
obstructions,
way,
but-
so
Okay, I see.
so I couldn't say what I'm not looking at the river at that point. I got train tracks in the way. I've got Clearcast, which has a building of about 300 feet long. That's perpendicular, parallel to the water, so that's gonna be blocking me as well.
Okay.
So it's hard to, what view I'm gonna have. I've got two large warehouse buildings that are in the way for a
Okay.
significant part of the area that's below a certain elevation.
Well, I'll let you explain and then I'll ask my question.
Okay, right. So we, just based off of elevation is how we identified these different areas within the conservation easement as to what the view would be. And likely the view would be looking towards the Hudson River. So that's what we focused on and how we split these areas up. The area in blue, which is on the northern side of the conservation easement, is at an elevation that's high enough that you see over the building. So that's about it's elevation 80. So someone standing here at 84, you see over everything. The areas in green are the areas at an elevation that are high enough to see over Clearcast and Diamond Dairy. Still likely not seeing much of the river, but you're at least you're at an elevation where you're looking over those buildings.
So the proposed building would obstruct the view to the left of someone standing there?
Correct, to the left. So you'd be looking, the view to the Hudson, which is almost west but not completely, would be obstructed by, a portion of it would be by the building, but you would still have a view beyond the building that expands over Clearcast and Diamond Dairy to the west towards the Hudson River. Okay, and then you have a small area in a crosshatch, very small area, where we say it's obstructed by Diamond Dairy and Clearcast. That's at a low enough elevation where you're not going to see over those buildings towards the Hudson River. And then we have a triangular area that you can pick a point and rotate that angle any which way, but so it's arbitrary in a way, but we try to follow some mathematical, make some mathematical sense as to how we drew it. The single crosshatch area is a view that would be completely blocked by the building because you're directly behind it. And you're only behind that, we're saying we're only blocked less than half of that width of the conservation easement as you go from west to east. And then lastly, you have the small red or pink area where you're looking, you can't look to the west because your building is in the way, the new building is in the way, but you can see over the parking garage and the first level and look to the west, towards the river. So that's how we identified these, what you'd see based on elevations. Again, in all instances, where we took the photo, we've identified it in the 2 locations on the plan. It's densely forested, so you're putting the building in there. Yes, Chairman, I understand, what you're asking for, but knowing the density of what we were looking at and where we were standing, you're seeing trees up until you get the sun.
So,
Seasonally.
again, not to belabor this, I think the narrative, when the chairman asked, are you going to walk us through the presentation, and you suggested you weren't, perhaps this is a good example of maybe why you should have said, oh, yes, we're going to walk you through. So I think that narrative helps.
Okay.
But it's a narrative, right? Again, if we look at viewshed case studies, often beyond existing and the building in play, even if the point is you don't see the building because of the tree line, you've all been involved with the leaf on and leaf off study, which we probably should have drilled into that. But for example, that narrative, is that narrative captured in the answers anywhere that we have before us?
And the answers in the
In
GIS?
the FSCIS?
Yeah.
I mean, all the renderings are in there. It probably doesn't have the detail that you're talking
You get where I'm
about, but.
headed. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not trying.
But again, look, as a practical matter, I think we've described, and I think this represents, could we have done a better job? Do you want to put a condition that will get a completeness, subject to, will include an expanded narrative on this? We can do that. I just don't want to have a delay for another meeting because we didn't include a paragraph or so being a little more expansive than, but I think the bottom line on this is, which he said, which I think he was clear, during the summer, when it's leaf on, as you said, John, most people are going to see trees. It's not, the majority of the time that this is going to be used or that this is going to be frequented, it's going to be leaf on and they're going to see trees. And during the winter, for those that come, I think it shows where people, if we can include a little bit more narrative, where people are going to see the river, where people are going to see all the buildings and the like. It's going to be a mixed view depending on where you're standing on the property. I mean, that's the general sort of, I think, practical description of what's going to be the views from the river from that property. I think people, and please, I don't mean to be disrespectful, I think people understand in general what's the general views that are going to be of the river and the building from that area and the trees.
Whether or not that's a reasonable statement, that you recognize we're gathering answers to questions for the record.
Here, so on page, let me just point it out, page 18, the applicant's engineer prepared a plan entitled View Corridors, which can be found at the end of this chapter, which shows the view corridors from various vantage points within the conservation easement. The applicant submits that this view corridor plan demonstrates that during on-leaf conditions, views from within the easement would be primarily of the existing woods. During off-leaf conditions, there could be view corridors of the river over the proposed residential building for the project, as well as over the Diamond Dairy and Clear Cut buildings. So I think that, could we add a sentence or two to be more definitive?
Yeah, we go back and replay
But-
the videotape, and you take probably
But I think.
3 or 4 minutes.
I think you get it. I mean, I think that describes the general conditions from a view shed perspective on that particular amenity. Some people, during the winter, they're gonna see it some from different angles. During the summer, they're gonna see most of the trees during leaf on.
No, that's right. I think, except that John is correct. There's a sentence that's missing, at least.
Okay, if we can certainly,
Only because there's gonna be a building there that's not there today. And we have to recognize that. That's the whole exercise that we're going through, right? What's the impact of this building? So if we don't recognize there's a building there,
we can
okay.
add
So.
sentences.
I have one more question. I'm sorry.
No, keep going.
So part of,
Eventually somebody will get
when we were discussing that particular area in 3 components. One was the intent of access to a nature trail and what that may or may not have been, what the intent was. The locations, as Chairman Clark asked for, and then the nature of the cut into the plateau or into the southerly portion to accommodate the amenity areas, et cetera. And you shared some, we talked about benching as opposed to a vertical height wall. Were there additional, I feel like we kind of left that in gear in terms of you responding to alternatives or what?
Right. We have, there's a limited area in that southeast
East
corner
corner.
where the retaining walls, as they've been designed, are really, we're kind of stuck with that just because of the elevation change and maintaining the sewer as a, you know, a whole. So there is no opportunity for benching in that corner in that southeast corner. We've looked at other, and then as you step down, coming towards the west, there is, your walls do start to drop off because there's some grading opportunities. So we've, redesigning those walls or adding additional benches, we're still accomplishing a masking of that wall with vegetation.
So conveniently, not to interrupt, these 2 images that are labeled here, those are not meant to address alternatives to the southeast corner.
Just the cut for the widening of North Water Street.
Okay.
So it shows 2 alternatives. This alternative that you're seeing has the rock face in the background.
Right.
Nearly vertical rock face, which is just about opposite Castle Plumbing, with a graded slope, and then the other is basically grading the entire thing without the rock face at the 2-on-1. We've sprinkled in
Which
some
is an
proposed.
excellent study. Talk about
Yeah.
visually answering or capturing the question and the dialogue. So when I saw the miniature of these, I'm thinking those were answering the dialogue we're having now about the southeast corner.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm still not clear on the south, I'm clear on the southeast corner in terms of that, the first time we saw the vertical section at the work session. And I just heard your answer regarding that, I think you were clear. So your answer is there are no alternatives like you see here for the road cut.
We're up
It's the
against
wall
the
or
sewer
nothing.
easement. We're up against the sewer easement, yeah. And the property line of how that's tucked in that southeast corner. And the view of those walls in the southeast corner is kind of narrow, so as you're driving around, trying to think of what perspective you would actually even see it.
Parking in the park, in the easterly portion of the parking lot, or living in the lower unit, that's the southeast corner.
Living in the lower unit, yeah. Driving by, there's a very, very narrow window where you'd see over the parking structure, over the roof garden, and looking, and then
Oh,
you
you
have.
mean as you come into the
As you're
project,
coming in,
right, no,
yeah,
I agree
public.
with that.
So
I-
people on
no
the
doubt
sub,
about that.
yeah, and the position of the pool is also blocking that southeast corner, so you're really, I'm talking about it because I don't have the visual, but realistically, there is, for me to draw something, you'd be blocked, and I think that would be, the position of the pool is such that it blocks most of that critical corner
So,
with those retaining walls.
All I would suggest there is a pattern for the past 20 minutes. The pattern is all that side, or primarily related to that, beyond the discussions that preceded this. It's interest about that side of the building, not to belabor that side of the building. I understand it's.
We tried to answer that question, the question you're posing, Mr. Fryer, on our cover letter on page 4, so.
Right, and in kind of going through how we came up with our presentation for the views in the conservation easement, when we were walking back there, you can't see anything. So the best way we thought would be illustrating it was by elevation, and that's how, that was why we didn't, we're trying to answer the question.
I'm not dismissing that, I'm not deferring it, but you understand, 10 years from now, when someone's looking at the record and the record says, we were walking back there, and you're not gonna see anything. That's not, that doesn't exactly fit into the process here.
Well, I mean.
Is that a fair characterization?
Well, the photos that were taken, the visuals, were of, exactly what was seen, and from the, from
And the
very
narrative,
specific
which
locations with the narrative that we have there.
Led to the-
Granted, could we have added a sentence or two to even clarify further? I can see that. But
So-
secret document is not a perfect document.
I yield the floor.
So my last question, did somebody interpret page PD 18? And it's only because the language seems not clear as to participation versus funding.
Go ahead. What?
So just page 18.
We're on.
It says as a condition of site plan approval, the applicant will be required to, and then it uses words like construction, maintenance of the trails, not limited to the applicant's participation in the construction of the paths. What does that mean in your mind?
That we would sit down with, I think, the people you had mentioned from the village who are responsible for that, and work out a conservation easement and the provisions of it that would include how we want to divide responsibilities for construction, our responsibilities for maintenance, to what extent, who would be the enforceable parties. It's a typical conservation easement. Those are all the subject areas that are covered, and it would be subject to the satisfaction of Village's Corporation Council and the Planning Board Chairperson. So we are committed to, as requested by you, collaborating with the village to create a trail that connects to the preserve and work out all the terms of the conservation easement, which are fairly straightforward. I mean, it's a public easement, and perpetuity be recorded. It can't be can't be modified, unilaterally modified. It has an enforcer for the benefit of, it's typically the village. You get to enforce the terms of the conservation easement. I mean, these are fairly common terms and provisions for any conservation easement. We would work out that agreement.
So, I think one thing that could derail is the funding model.
Derail the what?
Derail this is the funding model for how the trails get built.
We don't even know what those trails, the village, what trail they want to do. They don't know, we don't know what trail, how they would like to construct it, what materials, where do they want to come from, what area, are they going to be working on other trails at the time? And again, it's a condition of site plan approval, so we don't reach an agreement. Frankly, we don't have a site plan. We don't have a buildable site plan, so we're committing to reaching an agreement with the village that we'll get those trails done, and we're going to be a major participant and part of that.
So is that an offer to defer?
That's a commitment.
But no, I mean, in terms of, you're gonna keep your commitment open as a condition of site plan approval.
It states that as a condition of site plan approval, the applicant will be required to enter into an enforceable agreement with the village, so that's a pretty, I mean, that's a common condition, at least in my experience.
Can I just add something about the trails?
I don't know, it seems very open-ended for you.
Well,
But,
we don't know yet.
One might argue with an offer to build trails.
It's open-ended somewhat because we're not sure what the village wants, you're not sure what the village wants.
And that part worries me just a little bit too, But, okay. So I just want to be clear that, you're not only, offering to build it, but you have a financial investment in making it happen.
There will be, I'm sure, some type of investment and contribution to make it happen.
Okay. You're looking at me, or do you have it?
I just,
don't
I
know
wish there was a
how-
little more concrete than that.
I just
There
don't know
will be
the
some.
number on it, we don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So, I mean, we're apparently, which I think is a little risky.
I mean,
into the site plan on
Paul
whether
just
or
said
not-
again, many of the trails are just dirt, they're not highly engineered trails, so
Yeah, I mean, I would expect.
we're committing to it.
That a connecting trail into the conservation easement would be consistent with the trails that are already existing in Crawbucky Park,
We are committing to that.
and bearing the financial burden of
So,
trails similar to what
so long as
exists.
it's a reasonable cost, we're not bringing the trail all the way from the top down, and it's a trail that probably runs along the property line, the border coming from the entrance. That would be the one we would, but that's to be worked out.
I don't think we would have an expectation of them building the trail to connect to the conservation easement. But I don't, somehow, okay, so
Wait, Joe, I missed what you said.
I'm just saying is there some expectation that, for example, if there's a quarter of a mile away is the nearest existing trail, is there some expectation that?
Yeah, it has to connect to an existing, it's not a trail that exists to nowhere.
No, what I'm just saying is that would we see that as cost sharing? Because part of it's on village land, or do we see that as the public amenity that's being provided?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to put words in the words now.
And we said, I think we talked about including not limited to our participation in construction of the connecting paths, emphasis on connecting, the applicant's responsibility to maintain the conservation area in perpetuity, the location of such connecting trails, and the entity withstanding to enforce the agreement. And those are the typical provisions of a conservation easement, and we commit to that. And commit to working with the village to financially and otherwise to connect trail from Corabucky to our site.
But I think, so just we keep circling that word financial. And I worry on both sides that, you know, the developers committed to X dollars to develop trails, committed to offer no dollars to build trails. I think that has a definite, you know, point to it. Right?
Let's, can I offer this? If some members would feel more comfortable with more specificity, we can write that into the condition of the site plan. That's exactly what conditions the site plan provided for.
Some of you are very quiet. So,
Where did we, and I apologize, because I don't mean to revisit this. You haven't seen the EAC letter, because that was a statement?
We have not seen that or the latest.
Or the latest?
One from the historic preservation.
so
I assume we'll see those and they will be factored into the final site plan.
okay.
You can speak from the audience.
So does anybody, since this hearing is still open, has anybody come to speak tonight? If you lose the school district?
Good evening, everybody. It's not the first time I've been here. So I just want to share my concerns regarding the development. We haven't, just a few points that I've jotted down. The developer is claiming that the district is receiving a benefit as a result of the project, and there's no negative impact. The district's position is that there is an impact and there is no benefit. Some other points I just want to reiterate. The district is an interested and impacted party with significant concerns regarding the impact of this project on the district and its operations. And we've expressed these concerns at various times. April 24th, May 22nd, June 26th, and also I've submitted letters to you guys in writing expressing those various concerns. The district never received proper notification on the progress in reviewing this project over the course of its decade-long history. No notice of the draft environmental impact has been provided. The district has made efforts to establish a cooperative relationship with the developer to address its concerns, but has, to this point, been ignored, to be honest with you. And then beyond that, you know, I think we've reiterated the various concerns and the impact that this can have on the district. We understand the development itself, but I think the deepest concern is the students and the financial impact it's going to have on our district, our taxpayers, and also from a capacity perspective as it relates to our schools themselves. Thank you for your time.
So do you have some data? Do you have some data that will help us?
I could provide you data. I thought it was reflected in the letter that we gave on the 26th, but I can certainly come prepared to give it to you guys.
Financial.
That would help.
Great. So essentially you're saying cash in does not equal cash out.
When we're talking about, you know, I think oftentimes there's money that's being received as it relates to tax revenue. That's great, and I appreciate that from the perspective of our taxpayers, and I'm cognizant of that. But that's not new revenue to the school district. So when we have additional costs related to students, and potentially various needs and various costs associated to the needs of the students, that's not necessarily being factored into this. So I can give you an estimated cost as it relates to just a general sense. in the not so distant future. I mean, I can get it to you tomorrow, quite honestly.
So I think that's important to have, but more important is how do we resolve this case so we can get to the end of this? And I'm not just talking to you, Mr. Zarin is here representing the client, and you made a statement that there's no discussion between the two entities as to how to resolve this.
Well, first of all, I would sort of take a little bit of issue. I mean, we took the issues that were raised by the school district very seriously. We went back and did a additional 16 pages of analysis of data from existing developments and how many school children they're generating, data from the school district, data from the board, from the state board of education, data from the school budget and the like. So, again, respectfully, this issue was taken very seriously by the applicant. I've had several calls, discussions with the attorney for the school district, and I think the issue, the critical issue, and the reason that they pretty much haven't refuted the data that we provided, which is the normal, typical school analysis that every project does. It's the same analysis. We did it in more detail, and we did addendums to it, but I think the main primary objection or issue is how the taxing works. That because of the caps, because of the state cap and how the assessment works and the levy and those things, that sometimes some of the costs may not be offset by the taxes, because the way they levy and the way they do the levy, sometimes they're capped as to how they can generate new revenue. And it's not a project issue, it's a state legislative issue. Clearly applying all the methodologies that every project does in New York State, the tax revenue that we do generate exceed substantially the cost of the number of students that will be generated by this project. And that's the only analysis we really can do. And any other remedy, again, is really a legislative remedy, and that's meant with absolutely no disrespect. I understand and I appreciate the issues that were raised. Like I said, I've had several discussions with their counsel in this project and with their counsel in other projects. It's not unique to Ossining School District by any means. So I think, again, we've provided all the information, have taken this issue seriously, have presented you with all the empirical data that was available to us, and we went to great lengths, and I think we have treated this issue with what they call in secret a hard look.
I just have a question for Superintendent Sanchez. You mentioned in your letter that without additional mitigation, reasonable mitigation measures you reference, there's going to be impacts different on the school district than what the document currently reflects. But there's no real elaboration as to what those mitigation measures are. And I guess sort of my question is, what is a mitigation that's appropriate for this board when our comprehensive plan and our zoning code call for, developments of densities that are, suitable and within the plan of the community?
Yeah, so I understand the dilemma that the planning board is in. We've worked with various developers to help address some, maybe not all, of the impact that new enrollment's going to have on our school district. This is actually the first time in recent history where, or at least in the past few years, because there's been a real movement in the past few years, as you guys know, because you're here every night, thinking and hearing about various developments, to seek to address it. Is it going to be the perfect solution to everything? Potentially not, but we have worked to try to address capital needs that we have to otherwise can help to address student needs as it relates to enrollment. But I also, I just want to acknowledge, I understand the dilemma that the planning board is. I know your comprehensive plan, I understand all those aspects of it. It's a bigger conversation for we as a collective community to continue having conversations about. But in the meantime, in the now, this development is here. And my point is that there's students that are going to be produced from this particular development, as has been noted, and there's no consideration for the financial impact it's going to have on the school district, irrespective of the revenue that it's going to bring as it relates to the tax base. That we understand, but the other part of it is not new revenue to the school district as it relates to, additional costs that we're going to have for students and potentially we're going to have to levy as a result of that. So I can get you information. I'm happy to do that. That wouldn't be a huge task on our part to give you.
Well, that would be extremely useful. But I think the real question is not so much the data, but the mitigation. Right?
I agree.
And so how do we address that? I know this is sort of first time we've actually had a constructive discussion about this that actually talks about not, and I understand that taxes are sort of a running cost, right? But they don't necessarily take into account a capital impact. Like they're going to pay a recreation fee, likely, because it's an impact on our recreation environment at some level. There are other fees that get associated just to sort of, if you sort of buy into the corporation. Is that what you're suggesting? I think there's been nothing in the village of Austin, but I think the town of Austin has recently been thinking about how to do that in a constructive way.
The answer to that is yes. I mean, that's ultimately what we're seeking. Yeah.
So that's a conversation that we can actually have.
We'd appreciate the opportunity.
You're not going to fix it. You're not going to fix the taxes, right? Because we're bound by sort of whatever the levy is.
Right.
We're bound by the state's cap. But it doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to address some of the problems in a creative way. I don't know what our lawyers about that, whether that's a mitigation thing that we can bring up as part of this.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Just so we're clear, and this may be true.
Is it for me or?
Do you, well, maybe for both of you, but I think it's for you, Superintendent Sanchez first. Mr. Zarin cast the picture of what the dialogue what the dialogue was. Is that a fair characterization?
I respectfully disagree with his characterization of the conversation, but instead of going back and forth, what I would suggest as a solution to this is that potentially after this meeting, we call for a meeting to have a conversation. My office is open, we sit down and we have a conversation formally, and I'll make myself available to sit in with potentially my attorney or not. I've done it with other developments where we've actually sat down at the table and engaged in conversations. And in fact, some developers have actually helped us walk through what potential developments might look like and the impact it's going to have on our community and ultimately what it might yield as it relates to students. That would be my solution, but instead of getting a back and forth of
No, I understand.
who said what, I'd rather.
I'm not trying to spin this up, Michael. You made a statement and it felt like Mr. Sanchez needed.
I'm not going to debate to what extent they thought the conversations I had with their attorney were fruitful or not fruitful or not responsive. I think they were very responsive because I do understand the issue. The only school mitigation impact agreements that I'm aware of, I've never seen one perhaps that's being proposed today, is where the one I did with, frankly, with their attorney in another project, dealt with the question of how many school children are going to be generated. There was disagreement, and that's usually the issue. There's a disagreement on how many children are actually going to be generated by the project, and when the project puts out its numbers as to the amount of school property taxes that the project is paying, the debate becomes, or the controversy becomes, that number may not cover the number of school children because we, the district, feel that it's more than what you predicted. That's the only quote-unquote mitigation school impact agreements that I've seen. That I don't think is the issue here. No one has debated our numbers. We've used a conservative number of 11, then we went back out in response to doing more work and went and looked at very similar projects as this and found that most of the actual projects are generating probably 7 school children if it was prorated in our project, and the amount of school taxes we're paying undisputably far exceed the school cost for those children. So I would submit respectfully, this is a bigger discussion. It's really not one that is the project. If we were asked to, for example, make an additional payment over the school property taxes that the applicant will pay to sort of make up the shortfall because of the way there's the state levies and the way the state caps the levy, that would be illegal. There's no other district I'm aware of that has created those types of impacts, certainly not in Ossining and prior projects, and none I've seen. The only ones I've seen is the one I mentioned. We say there's going to be 6 school children, you have good data that shows there'll be 15 school children. If there's 15 school children, the amount of property taxes we're paying wouldn't cover that, so we create a sort of a process to analyze how many school children actually occur, and then we provide for a additional payment in the event there's more school children. That's the quote-unquote mitigation that's being utilized in most, not in most districts where there are these mitigation, but I don't think that's the issue here, respectful.
So we have both of you standing by one another tonight, right? And so there's several layers. It's how this is, even if it's an agreement to disagree, how is that captured in CAST and documented?
Yeah, we have a long, we provided this board with as detailed and as comprehensive an analysis that I've seen in school.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
And then in your findings, I would respectfully submit, in your findings is where you can sort of address and reconcile this issue from your perspective. I would argue that's sort of where you articulate your reconciliation of this.
But I think there's a piece before that, right? Because you know, in this process here, right, this is like a Q&A dialogue. In fact, we'll get to that at the end of this. At some point, we've got several chapters of Q&A now that all have to be buttoned up in one place so that we can go through it, right? So I think the findings are going to be based on the questions and the answers that we got, right? So we have to be sure that the Q&A is accurate, and then we can create a finding that moves this thing to the next level. But I think, you know, there's this gray space that I think we haven't really, and I understand what you, I understand your language and I understand, but I know that in the town of Austin, some things occurred between a developer and the school district that mitigated some of the impact that was going on. I don't know how they came to that agreement, but they apparently did. And it had nothing to do with something that was legislated here. But it could be as a mitigation of this impact, recognizing that, you know, and I don't know the answer to that yet, whether, because we haven't seen the data really from the schools at the level that Dr. Sanchez has talked about. But, you know, if indeed there is, then, and there's a mitigation that's possible, I'm not saying it will happen, but we should analyze and see whether it makes sense. I don't think we've gotten to that. I think we've gotten, and in fairness, you've done what the law, right? How we got to where we are at this late stage of schools, I don't know. But anyway, we have to get through this door at some point soon. And I'm just looking for a way to get there. So I'm not going to say any more about that. Do you have, you're looking at me like.
Not on this.
Oh, you have some? All right,
No, I just wanted to say in support of your general comments that the comments need to reflect everything we've incorporated here. It's not necessarily specific to the discussion taking place at the podium, but that I think is sort of the final piece to wrap up a lot of this.
Right. Okay, is there anything else?
Thank you.
Is anybody else?
I'm sorry, not to belabor this, but while we have these gentlemen here, because as you say, as you convey, there's an end game here somewhere. We got to get to the end. And maybe I'm missing. Mr. Zimmer,
I'm sorry.
while we have the both
Yes.
smiling,
I'm sorry.
so
You gotta smile in this business.
how do we get Mr. Sanchez, Superintendent Sanchez has shared observations and made some suggestions. And you shared, as I understand it, in the last 3 or 4 minutes, I don't want to put words in it, that the applicant has provided a comprehensive answer to the question. Is that where we are? Is that, how does that get folded into this? Where do you leave us trying to get to the end game of this?
I mean, it's two answers to this. We've been now before you, this is probably our 3rd or 4th meeting since the school testified. We did what we were supposed to do, we responded, and there's been no further submission of any empirical data, any type of data that refutes or rebuts or challenges. So I would submit.
It feels like maybe there is.
I mean, I guess I'm struggling with when does the process
Well, we're all struggling.
end? And the process, if you go through, you have a process. They made a submission, a written submission. We honored that submission. We took it seriously. We responded in detail to it. The next time the school came, they made very general comments to it. Again, they made general comments. I'm happy to sit down with the school district, provided
That's where I'm headed with this.
But provided I'm always, as you may know or you figured it out, I'm always happy to sit down and see if there's a way to address different concerns as we've done. I would just ask respectfully to this board that we're not penalized for that and the process delayed. That's what I'm asking.
I think that's fair.
It is fair, but I just,
You go to 4 meetings and you do your part, and now.
But Mike, that assumes the applicant is the only one frustrated in the room. And that's not a fair character.
No, I'm not frustrated. I think this was a very useful, legitimate discussion. I think you raised important questions. I think we've answered them adequately. I think this one is a much more difficult one because it's very general, and I thought we answered it. And it's still the quote-unquote mitigation. There's no offer of mitigation. The only mitigation that, as I said, I'm aware of, and I've been doing this, is not applicable to our application. I'm happy to sit down, but I think your board can close the secret. This discussion the record stays open with respect to the site plan. And we'll talk, and I'm happy to come back at the next meeting with respect to site plan. But I think you can certainly move on secret. Close, I think we put in, you took a hard look. That's this, as I'm sure your counsel has told you, that's the standard under secret. Did you take a hard look at the issues? It's not a perfect document. I cited to you the DEC, the people who wrote the regulations. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be a hard look. We got a very detailed submission from the school, and the superintendent made a submission, or a verbal one. We went out and did the homework and provided you with a very comprehensive hard look of all the issues that were raised. I'm happy to continue the discussion, but I think you can close secret today and meet your statutory requirements, and that moves the process, and we'll come back to you, site plan.
Any other questions from the board?
Can I just make a quick statement, because I was not here at one of the meetings, our attorney represented us, and wish I was, to be honest with you. And I believe, and I think it's been memorialized as well, that it was the planning board, and I'm not sure who directly said to our attorney here, to potentially meet and discuss this with the district. There was no meeting and there was no discussion. Irrespective of back and forth. Yeah, well, maybe the timing around it is in question, whether it was just before the meeting or many weeks before the meeting. My point is, putting the past behind us is, that we say there is going to be a meeting, and that someone can come back to you and say that, in fact, there was a discussion that took place between the district and the developer and or the attorney, whoever, or the attorneys. Because I think that's what is kind of what we're getting at, is either we can leave here and we can say there's going to be a meeting and potentially there isn't, and then you're placed in the position where you might be coming back and saying something, neither one of us want to be in that situation. And, what we really want to do is find a resolve to this, understanding your situation and what the developer is attempting to do for the house.
Okay, good, thank you. Mr. Lyle.
And Nick Stolatis again with the developer. Notwithstanding the comments and statements that Dr. Sanchez has made, I do want to clarify the record. In the 15 years that Plateau Associates has been in front of this board with the Hidden Cove development, at no time did the school board or anybody from the education department ever reach out to Plateau Associates to discuss the school system. So if Mr. Sanchez has been given different information, I want to set the record clear that has never happened. And as far as the state's economic analysis as to what is new money, the fact that we've been paying school taxes for the last 15 years and have generated no school children is certainly a financial burden on our part. And as Mr. Zarin has indicated, based on the analysis that is prescribed for planning board evaluation, the numbers clearly indicate that as a developer, as a development, Hidden Cove is going to generate a very large amount of school tax. Now, how that's distributed, we have no control over that, we have no say in that, but the fact of the matter is, from our standpoint, there is considerable new money being generated by the Hidden Cove development once it's approved and developed. So we have a difference of view in that respect, and I think this board needs to respect, and while Mr. Zarin may say he's not frustrated, I can tell you that we are extremely frustrated. Thank you.
Just make one more point. Yeah, 30 seconds. I think part of the issue in respect to the 13 years, and certainly that could have been the case and probably is the case, the notification I think we've noticed here is that we haven't been updated around the progress of this project. And so, the project could be taking place, but if we're not notified, then...
So can you guys agree to get a meeting in the next week?
I can do it tomorrow, to be honest with you. And we'll do it as a commitment.
I'm not gonna make it tomorrow.
I could do it tonight.
I can do it yesterday.
Okay, is there anybody else come
I
to
do with my
speak
eyes
to this
closed.
application? Nobody else has come? Okay. So before you sit down, I have one concern tonight, about a few. There's a few questions here, but the one is the letter from the chairman of the EAC. while he has given us some general comments, he has requested that he be granted a short period of time to have his full board review and get us a report. So we need to, out of respect for this board that's been recently reconstituted, I think we have to give them some time to respond. But we're not gonna give them forever. Their meeting, as I understand it, is August the 7th. So, and I wanna, and I think I alluded to this before, is that now that I think we have heard, with the exception of the EAC and the school district, all the comments, all the answers have been put to us in chapters over the last few weeks, that we get that all together and the board sit down at a work session before the next meeting. I don't know how we're going to do this. To go through and make sure that, since this document is going to be the planning board's document and not the applicant's document, that we all agree with what's written in that document. The board, does anybody have anything to add to that? That's my opinion at the moment.
Well, so logistically, there's a mechanism of, now we have, we literally have incremental revised chapters. So the housekeeping mechanism is, are we left individually to recollect? Not that because I'm not suggesting a whole new document. I'm just thinking out loud, quite frankly, because it's a bit of a task. Just literally, physically, making sure that we have a compiled, complete, comprehensive, up-to-date, all the chapters in front of us. I'm not suggesting the applicant provide that, yeah, so that's one question. And then, can we actually accomplish that in one, is that a realistic? Again, I'm speaking out loud for myself.
It's hard to tell how many red lines we actually had. But I think at some point, somebody can take the stuff that was not redlined and intermix them, one G, and put it in the appropriate place where it belongs, and we can look at it. I don't actually think it's as daunting a task as it seems to be. Yeah, the problem is not so much what the document says, it's then what are you going to do? Because there are some things that may not close and we're going to have to decide that, right?
Well, we know some of them.
Most of the stuff will close, right? We've sort of been down that.
I guess what's daunting here, and yes, now I guess I'm in the frustrating category, because
the long line at that window.
Yeah, I understand. So we had a work session. We've had a number of meetings. The idea was to raise the issues, the outstanding issues at the work session, which I thought was an excellent meeting, and the outstanding issues were raised. We went back, we did our homework, we responded. Your consultant, who's been providing you with an extremely thorough and comprehensive review, wrote you a letter and said this is ready for completeness, but for these three minor issues of which we were on. Then obviously, we come back tonight and there seem to be new issues raised, letters that we haven't seen, issues that were supposedly resolved, and now somebody comes up and says, I reiterate my position from last time, but comes up, raises no new information.
What were the new issues raised?
The issue of, I guess, that somehow now the FEIS is not adequate. In other words, why can't this board deem the document adequate tonight? That the consultant said, we've answered everything that you've raised. We answered the questions tonight that you raised, or you reiterated and wanted us to clarify. And I guess from, maybe that was an overstatement, but I guess my statement is, then if there are no new issues, then why can't the board, consistent with its consultants and consistent with what was raised tonight, close the secret process and move the process on?
So I will tell you, so my reason is because
Then I'll go second.
I
Excuse me?
believe we've come a very long way, and I think for the most part we've closed, tonight we actually closed a few open switches too. But at some point, I want to be able, since this is my document, I want to be able to read it in the format that it's going to be in, rather than just relying on my memory of what we agreed to in some other piece that we did a couple of weeks ago, right? It's sort of like reading a book, right? It goes from one to the other, and it's a series of pieces. And now what we've done is we've pulled out pieces, which is the way we ought to be doing it. We're focused on this. But now, I need to see that the whole document reflects what I think.
And-
That's just my point.
And I want to see the whole document in light of the final changes that were discussed. I mean, tonight we got the LEED Gold. We've had at the work session and tonight some final tweaks and understandings about what the conservation easement is going to mean. And so now, in light of all of that, I want to go through the whole document and make sure, in particular with Chapter 2 that has to do with the comments and responses to the questions, that all of that is stated in our words in light of all the changes, the moving pieces, and where it finally comes to.
Let me, I understand and appreciate what you're saying. Let me offer two things. First of all, I understand that the FEIS is quote-unquote your document. I understand the secret regulations, and that is why you encouraged us, and we made the edits as you requested. Where there are affirmative propositions that you may not necessarily agree with, they were worded as it's the applicant maintains the applicant's opinion. That's a very common way of dealing with it. I would respectfully submit that in the end, the findings is your document. As long as the findings is not inconsistent with the data that's in the FEIS. And I think we were very careful per your council's repeated admonitions to cover you and to protect you in that respect. Applicants very often, almost always, write the FEIS. You have to sign off on it. Ultimately, you vote, it's your document. But second, the document, again, it's a very explicit secret axiom that the FEIS does not have to be a perfect document. I mean, the DEC is very clear in that. It doesn't have to be exhaustive. It's the rule of reason. What is reasonable under the circumstances? And I would submit to you, we've had now 5 months and probably now 4 very specific meetings on the substance of that document. I think we've met those secret requirements and it's time to move on. If this board is unwilling to do that for all the articulated reasons, then what I would ask that, and this is, again, is something that I think we were trying to do originally, and I think we've done it, that we bring the site plan and secret together. Typically, in an application like this is a site plan public hearing, too. I don't know, your agenda is not completely accurate, but this public hearing is both on the site plan and the EIS. And what I would ask then, if we're extending it, that we extend the two together and that we close both public hearings together. And if there are any outstanding issues on site plan, that we finalize those too, because they typically run parallel. And the fact that we've extended the FEIS the way we have, I think has brought the two together. I'm not aware that there's a lot of major site plan issues open. I think we've answered everything in the Kellard's last 2 or 3 memos. They asked for one, as you said, one more comprehensive document with all the changes. What I would submit is that we submit to you a final FSEIS with all the changes and the final site plan. And that we commit ourselves, if you want to have a work session, to raise any final issues, and that we close the public hearing together and we vote together on SECRA and the site plan and finish the process. That's how it's.
I try not to express my opinion first, so let, Jesus, work for you?
Yeah, I think that will be fine.
Can we get the document
I mean,
that we talked about?
The document,
Yeah, I have no problem launching directly into the site plan. Whatever issues there may be left. But I'm not ready to say this is the final word on this document. But I'm not trying to, I'm saying that in good faith, I'm not trying to delay reaching the site plan either. So if we have a work session and we can go through and everyone can have, there are changes that were made tonight. There was LEED Gold, there may be some other tweaks in light of what happened at this meeting, that we have that, and every member of the board have the complete document in front of them. And we had a work session, we can go line by line or whatever we have to do through the document to make those final changes, and then, I think we'll move this to
Well, we
the
have
final.
to do it anyway.
Yeah, we can move forward.
I think what the suggestion is that it sort of,
Well, we have-
actually, I feel a lot more comfortable doing the two in parallel.
And that's very often how it's done, because if there's a change in the site plan, it needs to be reflected arguably in the SFEIS.
Well,
And we've been giving our site plans to you and to the consultants. We've been getting comments on both. So let's bring them together and finish
From the design professional
this.
side, I think it's what SECRA really wanted to be and somehow ran off track. So merging the two, from a grassroots design point of
We
view.
got 2.5. Mike?
So not to belabor this, I think to move it along, why don't we just swing both together?
All
right.
You're
Looking at me, yes, you can. I think it's a good idea. I think I've said to you before, the whole purpose of this is to inform you of the impacts of the site plan. At some point, they should come together. I would just say, in terms of, remember, this is what the first submission of the FEIS, I'm simplifying it, but this was the first submission. We've gotten revised chapters, which was the way I think you were asked to do it. I think what's being asked now is that there'd be it all be put into one book. I would just suggest, most of the changes have been to the project description and to the impact sections. Hanging out there still, I think what needs a re-review now, in light of all the submission, are the comments and responses, to see that everything that's here is reflected in them or referenced or so forth. While you're doing it, take a look, either you'll do that or I think that's what the board, the gravamen of an FEIS is the comments and the responses. I think, as the applicant said, they've given you the information now to do the responses to the comments. And there are draft responses in here. I'll leave it to you to decide whether now you want to update the responses in that section or not. I think that's what the board should focus on when it does sit down and do its work session on this, is now the responses to the comments. let the applicant take their own counsel as to whether they want to make suggested updates to the board. Those, I think, can't just be, it's the applicant's opinion. The board is required to give its responses. And, but I think you certainly have the information to do it now. So that's how I think you can move this along, and you can bring the processes together.
But I just want to clarify, that's no problem. We'll take a look at those and update those too. But I would only ask, and it's the only way we're ever going to get done on this process. We will submit the full, what we think are the responsive final site plans. And you've given us, we've had a lot of discussion about architecture, and we will do whatever the last ones, what we think are on the FSCIS. And then is all we ask, if there's comments, get it to us before the meeting, tell us your final comments, and we'll revise the documents and have an approval document for you.
Let's do a work session.
Then let's do it a work session.
Better.
So back to that work
And
session.
we'll literally, we can go through page turning at those,
Everybody's in
which
the
we've
room,
done.
and we get it done.
But there's some, and we all want that, right? And we're not getting an overtime check for that work session either, on top of what we're not getting here.
It was a very
So,
productive.
But it just feels like logistically, there's some heavy lifting here in the works. We keep throwing everything in the back into the work session truck, and there's still some heavy lifting.
But what we did with Keller, I mean, remember, and this is how it's supposed to work. We had a work session. We had a lot of good discussion. We went back and revised and made a submission. Keller turned it around quickly and said, except for these 3 issues, we think you've responded to all the issues that were raised. Typically, you know, I don't think it was unreasonable for us to come to this meeting and then think that we did it. We got to that point. So,
Maybe not, but we can belabor why there's a
So have we
difference of
moved on to the
opinion.
work session and not belabor it? I mean, are there more we need to talk about tonight, or are we just gonna get this?
Other than how you make a meaningful work session, that's all I'm trying to get
That's
to.
where, yeah.
I think with respect to this document, the work session, your work at the work session should focus on, I think that the Keller office, I have a few comments on what I'll call the chapters, the description of the project and the potential impact sections can get pretty well set. Your focus should be on the comment and response section. Do you agree with, or do you want to change the responses to the comment? Visual, comment, this is going to have a visual impact. Response, that's a response of your board. Whatever that's going to be. We viewed the data, we say it's not. We reviewed the data, we say there would be some impact, but, next comment, next response. You've got, I think, all the information now to go through those responses, and the applicant can modify the way they are now to add stuff to them if they want, or you can just do it at that work session. But these responses are yours, and you've got to either say, yep, we think that's an adequate response, that the applicant has proposed be our response. That's where I think your focus should be, not necessarily going through all of chapter project descriptions and it may be you'll just go through and go, yep, the way they've drafted it is acceptable to us as our response.
And individual straw polls?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I think you should have read it in advance and be ready,
Right,
each
no,
of you to say whether, you don't want to be reading it there that night the first time, and I know you have.
Okay, all right.
That-
you give us a week, we'll turn it around, and if you want to do the work session soon after that, that's fine. And we will also turn around and provide you with final site plan drawings. And we'd like the same, if you have any further issues on the site plan.
Good. Okay, sounds like a plan.
Gotta get to the end.
Listen, yeah.
All right.
I mean, I don't know any other way to do it.
Paving new ground, great, thank you.
Are we gonna do a date for?
Well, I think we want to we should wait for the EAC.
And what I'm going to try to do, Mr. Chairman, is I'm going to try to set up a work session with them next week, because one of their members, key members, will be away. So if I can get them in, we could possibly get that recommendation earlier than rather than later.
Historically, many board members have been away portions of August. Should we take, is anybody going to be away in August?
Yep.
Yeah? Yeah, last week. I think so. We're in a challenge, let's, dovetailing that is going to be.
So,
We can work through change it. We can-
All right,
We'll set that up.
So the environmental committee is not gonna meet for another 3 weeks?
They meet once a month. They're meeting with, but, as I said, I'm trying to get them in, and they have actually agreed to do a work session. They now have all the documents, and so if I can get them in for a work session next week, I will do
is
so.
anybody around the first week of August?
Yes.
First week of August. First week of August?
Yeah.
The week beginning with the 6th or the week beginning with July 3rd?
Either one of those doesn't matter to me, but it might matter to some other people.
I guess July 30th is next week.
Yeah.
That's true.
So this is what, the 7th is a Tuesday night?
7th is a Tuesday night.
Well, if the EAC they could do in a work session before, they wouldn't meet then, and we'd be able to, that may actually work.
7th or the 8th?
Yeah, actually, the 8th also works, there's no board of trustees meeting that month.
Is there any way to do the 9th? Is there any way to do a Thursday? Is that, would that?
Okay.
Either a Thursday work first?
Thursday's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thursday the 9th.
All right, see you there,
Wherever it is, wherever it is.
wherever it is.
Can we
And we'll-
actually find a room that we can?
We'll make the submission prior to that.
Or we can actually say, this is gonna work, the way it ought to work. This is fine.
We can also maybe get people on the tables. and-
Yeah. All right, we'll figure out.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, I just went through the BAR, like everything on the BAR, the planning board meeting.
Except for Bethel. That's actually just really now BAR.
Okay. Is Bethel here? Good night, Jim. Can't tell.
Bethel Nursing Home? Yes. Oh, that's wonderful.
What about the one above that? Is that?
Or it's planning board, but I don't know.
Oh, I see.
Have you done anything about 49?
Still at the ZBA.
So that's good.
49 Spring is adjourned?
Yeah.
First that bill is the planning board thing. Okay, so, Bethel. So, construction of a covered walkway.
Apparently, they're not doing a cover.
Hi, your name for the record?
My name is Mark Pearson. I'm the project architect for the project at 17 Narragansett Avenue. We submitted for Architectural Review Board and Planning Board, based on the fact that we were proposing a covered drive-through and walk. And in recent weeks, with working with the construction manager, that canopy has been removed from the project. So we're not actually constructing anything on the site anymore. What we're doing is renovating 2 floors of the building, which currently are capable of supporting 80 beds in a skilled nursing facility. That's going to be reduced down to 43 on the 2 floors, so that every unit will be a single, private, with its own bathroom and shower facilities. And about all that we're really doing at this point now is we're redoing the HVAC, so we no longer need the louvers underneath the windows. and we're proposing to remove the very commercial style windows in lieu of residential style double hung windows with aluminum cladding and wood interiors. So we're really looking for an architectural review board approval of those items.
Okay. So there's nothing.
Are those impediments new?
Yes, we're adding those as well. And we're adding a cornice at the top, trying to break up that extensive brick soldier portion that's at the top of the building.
I mean, I think it's fair to say, however you characterize that building, it exists today as some interpretation of a transitional contemporary building, and the idea is to move that needle somewhere else.
To soften the scale, yes, I mean, take dark bronze aeronautic finishes and heavy brick soldier coursing and move to a lighter colored cornice and lighter colored windows.
And so I hear the notion and I understand, but, right. And my only observation, aside from the double homes, which I think I get where you're headed with that, and I don't think that alters the existing fabric of the building too much. The cornices make me blink a little bit. And I understand the idea. It's how the idea is manifested in the real world, right? What are they? What are they gonna be? Are they like 1 foot wide and?
We're talking about the cornices or the pediments?
The pediments, I'm sorry.
Pediments, okay. Well, we have this massive 5 courses of soldier courses that are at the top of the building that wrap the whole building. And we've added an aluminum cornice which covers most of that. It's just
So the cornice that you're adding is metal?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so that's an important note.
Yes, and
It's not like an ephes foam thing that you're,
no.
okay.
And-
Well, that's
And
important.
so I mean that's one horizontal element covering up another horizontal element. So then the pediments were an attempt to, on the public side of the building, to break up that banding at the top, which is so
And
imposing.
Again, I get it, just
Okay.
tell me what the pediment, you know where I'm headed here, that we don't want a strip shopping center, Hotel 6 pediment, interstate pediment that's been glued on to a building, that you didn't really understand from an elevation like this, but when you walk around the neighborhood, and it's this thin element that's just kind of sticking up in the air, and it's suddenly, wow, that seems a little foreign.
They are thin elements that stick up in the air. Their depth is minimal. I mean, they're projecting out from the building, and they go back as deep as the existing coping at the top of the building. So they're 2.5 feet or so deep.
Are they metal?
They will have metal on top of them, but we're planning on ephes as the face material.
Yeah, I don't want to say that's pretty much what I was nervous about, but that's pretty much what I was nervous about. I mean, that's my observation. I mean, I think if you're going to add a cornice to a building of that vintage and that era and that aesthetic, metal was the right move. If you just said, we're going to build those pediments out of a light metal, so it's harmonious with this new cornice we're introducing, and it's gonna have a different character to it other than synthetic stucco. You reeled me in a bit, I think. But now it's, you know, we're gonna add this cornice, it's gonna be metal, and then we're gonna add these pediments and it's gonna be ethos, and you know where I'm heading, right? Where so that's,
I don't think that the owner would have an issue with
No.
changing that to a metal panel system up there. If that's what the architectural review board wants to
Are you
see.
doing both buildings or just the?
Just 17. 19's not being touched.
I don't know how you do it, but I think it at least resonates as a single material and color and.
Our main intention is just to soften the look of the front of the building. That's really all that we're trying to do. Make it more home-like.
But I'm one voice, and if you said, you know what, we're dug in, these pediments are meant to be standalone, they're meant to stand away from the corner. Everyone can listen and make their own decision.
So,
You're already beyond that.
so, what, the top is, if I'm standing in the parking lot, am I looking at the top view?
Yes.
Where does that second set of doors? I understand these doors over here, because there's a little,
Yes, the entry right now is you go into this little breezeway between the two
Right.
buildings and turn in, and we're proposing to move that entry to the front of the building so that it's more,
so it comes smack into the elevator, right there. So it's
well, you're gonna come in and the elevator will be on the
there.
right-hand
Yep.
side.
Yeah, right there. Okay. All right, and you're leaving the brick alone, right?
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? No? All right. Any from the public? Any questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Dave Napolitano. I live directly behind Bethel. This question is for Bethel. Whoever represents Bethel here.
I do.
Okay. You guys sent out 35 certified letters as of Friday. I got mine yesterday saying covered walkway. Now, as of Friday, did you know it was going to be no covered walkway? There's a 35 certified letters at $6.70 each. That's a lot of money to spend. It's over $200 for something that you changed. So when did this change happen? And now I'm a little bit leery. Are you guys gonna sneak something else in? I'm right behind the parking lot of your building. Don't do anything wrong.
We've been there since 1960. We haven't done anything wrong.
Okay.
We don't plan on doing anything wrong.
All right.
We're a non-for-profit organization.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that.
So the question is, so are you?
So it says here on your agenda, so you guys apparently, or whenever this was typed up, didn't know,
Didn't know.
okay?
So it seems like this is less of an impact.
Yes. Okay, it's gonna be the front of the building only?
There isn't going to be a protocol.
No, I'm sorry, no, the question is, so it's a good question. So this is gonna wrap the building, right? So you got we're looking at least 3 sides.
The metal cornice will wrap the building.
That's the top of the building?
That's the top of the building.
At the
And
roof?
the windows are gonna change on all 4 sides.
Yes.
Now, the windows were changed back in, I've lived here since '82. No, after that, the windows were changed. I'd say mid-'80s, okay? And, yeah, I'm a little older than you are, okay? So you're gonna change the windows, no problem, I got no problem with that, all right? I just wanna make sure that we're clear on what's gonna happen here, because it's not what my letter said, that you guys sent me.
That's it.
That's it, that's all I gotta say, I just wanna make sure that everybody's clear.
We made a change.
Okay,
Super.
all right,
Anybody
very good.
else?
That's all I gotta say.
No?
Same thing, I'm a resident next to, right behind Bethel, and on the other page, the last page, you're talking about a parking lot. I don't know if we're gonna address that now, but are you guys talking about the parking lot being changed? If you look at the last page, it says here Bethel Nursing Home proposed changes to the parking area. Is that at the back, the front, or is that another time?
As part of the portico, or the portico share, we were gonna have to modify curbs. Since we're not putting that in at this point, there's no modifications to any of the curbs, asphalt, or walls.
No problem.
All right, any other questions? No? Okay, so is there a motion from the board to approve the amended BAR application that just affects the facade of the building?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Including the comments, the questions and the comments that they agreed to with the.
Yeah, but as an aluminum,
Yeah.
no EPS. Okay. So Walter,
Yeah.
Jesus, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried, done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so 175 Croton Avenue is a planning board application as well.
It's also going to be
Adjourned, that's even better. So then we're gonna move along to planning board, Baker, Croton Avenue, no number. Why is that carried on our agenda?
need not be.
My understanding is that the Board of Zoning Appeals denied the variance.
That's correct.
Sir?
I'm Willie Baker, the applicant. I requested this be kept on the agenda only for a couple of questions for this meeting of July 24th, 2018. This is PB 14-16. It's the third application that I've made on this property. Although the ZBA denied my application, I wanted to come and thank this board for its work. You took a good, long, hard look before granting the conditional negative deck on the February 27th meeting, I believe, of this year. I'd like to keep this application pending or adjourned only because of possible discussion with the village board and or litigation results. I've spent many, many thousands of dollars with the architects and planning and your consultants, and I have asked, and I would like to ask again, for a billing statement from your consultant, because I was informed way back when with the meeting with Lynn Abney and Mr. Khan that there was a balance available at the time. And I don't know what I should do, is request a refund or leave the balance, because I'd like this adjourned pending litigation results. And I have spent quite a bit of money in the engineering on this property, the subterranean, the stormwater management plan, and just to have it cast off by the wayside is getting very onerous and very expensive. I've owned this property since the mid-1980s. I bought it from the village. In 2009, it was rezoned from business to multifamily, and I don't know if I was supposed to be notified of that, but I wasn't. And I intend to proceed with the village board with a question, and I was wondering what the procedure is with this board.
With the village board or this board?
This board.
Well, we can't stay open forever.
I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that perhaps it just be removed without prejudice in the event that there is either an application to the village board, which I believe from discussions with Mr. Baker's counsel may be an application for a map change, or if there is in fact a legal proceeding brought with regard to the ZBA, this matter can retain its its file number, but it need not remain on the calendar.
So, yeah, we've done this in the past. In fact, we may have done this on this at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Too, right?
Oh, yeah.
So does that work for you? Is that we just remove it from the agenda, and then when you're ready to do something?
Well, my question is, if I come back, all the engineering I did with Keller and Sessions, where does it go?
That depends on what you do.
It was all subterranean engineering.
Oh, no, I mean,
It's probably okay.
Right, we can't guarantee, but if the science that was produced to support your application was valid 2 years ago, I suggest a majority of that science will be valid a year from now?
I think that's. He's not gonna have to start from scratch.
Right.
Right.
Particularly as it goes to the soil bearing, that's not gonna change.
Yeah, and we did soil testing for
Right.
stormwater. I mean, those are results that were needed to be done, whether it's this application, the following one, whatever shape the project takes, those remain.
So I think we can remove this for now without prejudice, and when you're ready to come back, we'll just reactivate the file.
All right, thanks again.
Okay? Thank you. Victoria Home. What are we doing here?
We have a presentation. I can just hand these, so a hard copy of what's being presented. Addressing the final issue, which I believe are all in red. I'll be quick, okay? This is all right.
Yeah, just click it and it should just keep going.
If not, you're gonna help. Good evening, David Venditti. James Norbert Fonzini, Classical and Venditti, attorney for the applicant. Very home. We're here tonight on the 90-bed amended site plan approval and conditional use approval. Here's the front cover sheet, which is, I think, a nice rendering of what the view will be landscaped from North Malcolm Street, particularly with respect to some of the questions raised on what I keep calling the southern portion of the North Malcolm Street view and the elevations. We'll get into that a little bit further here. This next slide is just the main entrance from the roundabout as designed. I wanted for people who are new to this, maybe to this board, or those who might be here for the first time as a result of the notice of the hearing, of the meeting, or those who may be turning in, to just give a little reiteration of the purpose and need of this. Okay? Okay, the purpose and need of this project. You know, as we've said before, it's quite simply to keep Victoria Home open. It's a not-for-profit that's been providing care to the needy for over 100 years. Its mission is to do so, and in fact, in doing so and taking care of the elderly, some of which have lived there for decades, some over 2 decades. I believe it houses the oldest nursing home resident in the area at 106 years old. They bleed over $1 million a year out of their own pocket to care for people. I think I was told this past year was upwards of $1.5 million to care for people and keep this home open and keep people employed. There's a certain time frame at which that cash burn will end, and Victoria Home, in the absence of this project, would be forced to shutter its doors. I want to go to the questions that have been most recently posed by Kellett Sessions on behalf of the Planning Department of the Village of Austin. We received a memo from Mr. Tremelli and Mr. Hildenbrand, dated June 21st, 2018, and they requested annotated responses. And I believe that we have submitted all of them to you, and it's in the package that you've gotten. I wanted to just go over them briefly. The first comment was that they wanted us to have a meeting with the fire department to address in a formal fashion fire safety issues and their approval of that. Jamie, and here's where I apologize if you see Jamie on the bottom, your name was misspelled. I've been very diligent about making sure everyone knows it's J-A-I. But anyway, she scheduled a meeting for us on July 13th, and we held it here with the fire department, Fire Chief Brian, and we reviewed the hammerheads, the changes that have been made, and all the fire access and the 360 degrees, and it was confirmed that it was adequate in their view. I asked them if they would put that in writing, and of course, they said, as fire chiefs, no, they will never put anything in writing. But Brian volunteered that he would, and in his memo recently submitted, he indicated to this board that the fire department had no objections to the plan in regard to emergency access. And that was July 20th memo from Tellet Sessions. We were also asked, a question was posed.
Just to that.
Yes.
So.
If I hit the next button, does it go back?
No, you don't have to go
Oh,
back, because this question
Okay.
is very simple. So more important than the fire department or Brian making a statement about the fire department approval, your professional engineer is stamping this plan that says that it's adequate for emergency access.
Correct.
That's what we care about.
I know, but it was also indicated to us that you cared what their opinion was.
I know, I do, but I don't want anything legally implicating the fire department, because none of them are paid to be engineers.
That's correct, and
Safety or otherwise.
that's why they won't sign anything.
So I just want to be clear that you guys are telling us. Okay.
All right. The next comment that had been made was the maximum proposed retaining wall heights shall be clarified in the design detail, and that was done, sheet 5, C507 was revised to illustrate this. Here's sheet 507, and I think that when someone presents the full set of plans after me, they'll be able to enlarge this more, but if you look, you'll see marked in red where the comments are that relate to that question. Third comment that had been made was simply a housekeeping issue, that the stormwater pollution prevention plan to the New York State Speedies general permit should be corrected to GP 015-002, and so shall the notice of intent. And if you can see the notice of intent below, in green is the correct number that's been corrected. Also, we were asked to correct on the NOI, the post-development future land use as being institutional. And as you can see, in question 3 to that, it's been indicated in both instances as institutional, so that's been corrected. Next comment was that the areas and extent of reinforced pavement should be labeled on the plan. And we indicated in our annotated response that the location of the reinforced pavement has been indicated on sheet C101. And again, that will be blown up, but you'll see it really on the top, third line down, reinforced concrete apron. The sixth comment that had been made was that a landscaping plan shall be provided for consideration by the planning board. The plan shall also specify planting within the proposed rain garden. We have submitted, in our most recent submission, a landscaping plan concept as well as a detailed planting plan developed by Dirtworks, and it's been included in the plan set. Here's the first image is the concept plan. The next is detailed illustration, and as you'll note that the green highlighted trees and shrubs are native plants. As I'll discuss later, when we met before the EAC, they wanted to know, that was one of their big areas of interest, is what native species were being used to make sure that we weren't mixing invasive species in there. And you'll see from the rest of the legend on another sheet that'll be shown to you tonight, the overwhelming amount of native species, the rest being adaptive, which are quasi-native. They've been here so long they're considered native and not invasive. And then we're just giving you some samples of the type of native plantings that are incorporated into this plan. There are only, I included 2 pages, I didn't think you needed to go through the rest, but in the other document that I gave you was my letter of July 23rd to the EAC, and attached to that letter are 10 pages illustrating all the native species that are going to be used on site. Number 7 indicated that the SWIP mentions rainwater harvesting as a method to reduce stormwater runoff, and this should be discussed in greater detail. Anticipated irrigation demand shall be calculated, and a more stringent procedure may be required to keep the system functional. Any proposed supplemental irrigation service lines shall be included in the site plan. As the response, it's been indicated that further detail as requested has been provided, which addresses this comment in the SWIP report on page 9 of 24 and Appendix H. And I just highlighted a certain section on page 9 that goes directly to this, providing the additional detail and letting you know that the calculations for the irrigation required for the proposed landscaping is shown in Appendix H to the SWIP. Another housekeeping item, it was mentioned that the zoning bulk requirements table and area variance worksheet on sheet C-101 should be coordinated with the zoning worksheet provided in the application. There appears to be minor discrepancies. That was correct. We looked at it, and there was one discrepancy in the proposed building height. Has been corrected to be consistent on both sheets as 53 feet. That's appeared to be the only discrepancy. You can see here in the highlighted comment on the zoning worksheet where it's 53. And the next one is on sheet C-101. You can see in red where that's been corrected to be consistent. And in addition on C-101, the rest of the table has been included, which is now thoroughly consistent with the variance worksheet. Comment 9 was that plans shall be revised to demonstrate that all handicap parking spaces meet all ADA dimensional requirements, specifically the access aisle for the ADA parking space closest to the sidewalk shall be a minimum of 8 feet wide. We had discussion with Keller Sessions on June 26th. The intent was for the 8-foot drop curb sidewalk to function as the access aisle for the space. They've agreed that this is acceptable. Sheet C-101 has been revised to make the intended use more clearly displayed. In addition, spot elevations have been added to the plans to indicate ADA compliance on sheet C-107. 10, all ADA curb ramps shall direct pedestrians to the drive aisles and not towards parking space, and the sidewalk area around the ADA spaces is flush to the pavement elevation, and the ramps are redirected to the sidewalk to provide safe pedestrian access and not towards the parking spaces. And you'll see on sheet C-101, the portions are marked in red that address both those comments and the indications that you wanted provided on the plan. Comment 11, as the project is located west of New York State Route 9, as such we needed a review by the EAC for determination of consistency with the policies of the village LWRP. We appeared before the EAC, we'll await your determination, and you should get notification from them, but in connection with that, we did submit that supplemental letter. We also submitted 6 CDs to be distributed to them to include all our revised plans, the SWIP, as well as the plans that were submitted to them in September of 2017 for the earlier 90-bed iteration, which they had approved so that they could have a level for comparison of the two sets. They also had, the questions that they had at that meeting were about solar voltaic system considerations, geothermal wells, landscaping and native and adaptive species, stormwater rain harvesting, and sustainable construction practices. As to solar voltaic system considerations, we let them know that we evaluated it, and this was the determination. The potential to add a PV array to the roof with approximately only 9,000 square feet of area available would allow for about 450 panels yielding 160 kilowatts. This would only produce about 15% of the energy usage for Victoria Home, but the associated costs for this array would be approximately $1 million. As this project has been recently redesigned and scaled down in scope in order to make it economically feasible for this not-for-profit to continue its mission, the life cycle cost does not make it economically, it makes it economically unfeasible. There's really no realistic recovery of that money, and it's a gigantic out-of-pocket expense for only 15% of your electrical usage. With respect to the geothermal wells, that also had been reviewed, and it looked like approximately 50 closed-loop wells would be required. Each well would be about 495 feet in depth, spaced about 20 feet apart. While they can be located anywhere on the site, you know the topography is pretty challenging with slopes and with rock outcroppings and obviously some bedrock. And although they do not necessarily have to be near each other. But at any rate, assuming a 7x7 grid of 49 wells spaced 20 feet apart would need approximately 120 foot by 120 foot area, and the associated cost for the well field alone would be $600,000 to $750,000 up front. Again, that's not a feasible cost for this applicant. particularly since further mitigating against the use of geothermal wells, is that this particular site includes limited real estate available for the wells and difficulty with phasing. It's of tremendous importance, as I mentioned before. We have a 106-year-old resident, we have more than one resident over 100, we have people living there anywhere between 10 and 20 years at times. And it would require the existing facility to be operational during construction, leaving the north end of the site the best potential location of wells under the paved parking. The associated drilling would block entry and egress to the site. It would be unreasonably destructive to the residents of Victoria Home and the surrounding community in general. Siting of the project was challenging and limited due to both the slopes of the property and the location of significant outcroppings. Accordingly, geothermal wells did not appear to be an appropriate option for this particular site, keeping in mind the non-disturbance of the residents and the neighborhood quality of life, leaving that unimpaired.
Dave, question for you.
Yeah.
On those two particular things, the photo, the
Yeah.
solar panels and the geothermal, did your engineer estimate those costs, or those actual estimates from someone that would do the project?
Merrick answered that. I believe it was from somebody in that
It's
business.
from engineer. I'm Mario Casaro from Hercules. It was from our engineers that started working on the project.
Because
They're-
they put
they're
the numbers together?
Yes.
Not a vendor or somebody that
No.
actually do the work?
No.
No. The other thing that was of concern to the EAC, and I imagine to this board to a degree, is landscaping in native and adaptive species. I think we've put together a well-organized landscaping plan, and it was...
I think you did too.
Thank you.
You can take the next slide.
All right.
Just give us
But just like, you know, look at
overview
slides
of
10 through
slide.
13.
Dave, can you summarize some of these rather than read every? slide?
Sure. On stormwater and rain harvesting, we have stormwater practices, including rain garden, pervious pavements, infiltration basin rainwater harvesting equipment to supply on-site irrigation. These practices are green infrastructure practices. They will reduce pollutants and peak runoff volumes to acceptable levels. And then I gave you a blurb on how wonderful rain gardens are and all the great things that they do, including attracting butterflies and, I'm told, hummingbirds. Finally, they want to know about other sustainable construction practices, and here I've just given you a bullet point of the things that we will be doing to really be sustainable and green practices during the construction process that I think will benefit everyone. 12th comment was with regard to steep slopes. They really wanted it to be more graphically illustrated. The slopes range between 15, greater than 15, less than 25%, and those over 25 with a calculation that quantifies the proposed disturbance areas, and that's done on sheet C110, which you'll see better when Mary goes through it, but that calculation has been provided. 13th question is you wanted a weighted average grade calculation.
So before we go through all this,
Yep.
did you go through all this with the EAC? So did they see your answers to these questions?
They saw the answers, not to all of these, they saw the answers to the 5 issues that were important to them that I indicated before. These are in response to Mr. Tremelli's questions in his memo that he wanted us to annotate for you.
Yeah, and we've reviewed everything, and that's why our memo we submitted most recently really just asked the applicant to update the board on the fire department meeting and the status of the EAC, which I think is...
I think we covered.
Yep, so you see here, all the information asked for was given in sheet 101, 107. Then, this is the last memo that we just got dated July 23rd, and I was very happy that the only comments were indicating that the fire department had no objection to the plan, and looking for the determination of consistency from the EAC. And it was confirmed by email that there were no further planning questions concerning any of our submissions.
Okay.
Well, I had something for the board, though, because the board also had a couple of comments that they raised. One had to do with the, let me get to the page, with the window array and the look of it. Something we were asked to go back and take a look at maybe how we could break up the view break up the, improve the aesthetics.
Let's let the architect speak to that.
Okay, all right, well then, don't look at this slide, because it's beautiful and it shows the triple windows in the base and the open porches, but we'll speak to that. And don't look at that slide either, because these are the new window renderings. John, please close your eyes. All right. Last, I think it was a question of yours concerning what I call the southerly North Malcolm elevation comments. And for the past 3 years, we take all of your comments to heart, and we take them very seriously, and we take a good hard look at them. And because of the siting, really the only ways to deal with this visually are through material and landscaping. Also, you can this slide is good for that too, because you can see T1, T2, that's all stone facing. So that material is going to break up the other materials that will have subtle changes of color in the same family, but that will be stone with the louvers. But the landscaping is really going to be what does it. Whether it's, kind of learned a new thing tonight, whether it's on leaf or off leaf, it's the landscaping and the trees that are going to be there are going to provide really an effective visual buffer for anybody passing on North Malcolm who isn't walking onto the property to come take a look at the corner of it. And I think that between the choice of materials, stone, contrasting with the upper materials and the colors and the window breaks, that view, we believe, will make it a non-factor for the public. These were requested streetscapes. They're within the plans. You've seen them. They'll also show you what the proposed views versus the existing views are. And in conclusion, we're going to have Mario from Perkins Eastman come and go through some of the sheets, the more technical aspects. And then we'll have environmental compliance services come and have your secret discussion. They submitted also to you the comparison document, the type of document that we had submitted previously to you. And we respectfully submit that I think that we've answered all the questions posed to us. We've taken a look at everything. We've made changes wherever possible. And we're looking very much forward to a negative declaration, because we'll need to go with that and with at least a positive indication back to the zoning board for them to issue their final zoning approvals or ratifications of the previous variances, and then to come back here for a site plan approval resolution. Thank you. Any questions on that? If not, I'll turn it over to Mario.
Because I had the rest of them.
Okay, I have everything that he has, plus a few
Okay. Who's up?
Hi. There's a rendering that we didn't have earlier, so that I brought today. It's a bird's eye view looking over at North Malcolm. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. Go back to the.
It escaped.
You gotta close, yeah.
Oh, there.
That's back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, you're back.
I gotta go back here. Have to close this out?
You have to close it out, yeah.
I can read this. Those are all drawings.
You have to go into the flash drive. Yeah, you have to go on the flash drive.
Huh?
You have to go into the flash drive.
On the left-hand side.
Yeah.
The left-hand side of the box, there should be a place for the flash drive.
Where it says removable disc, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't read. Okay, so this is our elevation. Change that we made to the North Malcolm elevation. Well, first of all, we rendered them to show you different materials. There's two significant changes. One change is We brought these two sets of windows in this wing together and brought them out to have a shadow and a relief, so you don't have that long string of elevation. The other thing that we've done to the elevation is this lower level at the bottom here. That's where a lot of our mechanical rooms are. So there will be louvers. The louvers aren't properly sized yet because we haven't gone through design with our engineers on this. But we've created these arched little alcoves to hold the louvers in place to break the scale of that level, so it's just not a bare stone wall. As we stated earlier, the materials are stone at the two lower, at the base.
What type of stone?
Well, it's a cultured stone. It's not a real stone. It's a applied stone. And we have cement siding, lap siding, and shingle siding above the white line. I can't.
Can we see some of that stone? Any picture of it up front or?
No, we haven't selected the materials yet. But this is close to the color scheme that we're thinking. There's also, I want to get the bird's eye view up. I think this one's not bird's eye view. This is the colored landscape plan, which you saw earlier.
Go down further, you got the bird's eye.
Okay.
Go back. Two more, yeah, there's one bird's eye, now you got another one.
So this is the bird's eye view. We've had this, we had a similar view in a previous submission. I think this, we wanted to show you this because this kind of shows you how we're sited and what our limitations are. Once you get beyond this point, the property slopes to the west. There's the overlook to the river, so we can't push the building further back from North Malcolm. We can't push it further up the hill because we have to keep 30 feet away from the existing building during construction because that has to be operational during construction. And only after this gets built and approved by the Department of Health do we tear down the existing structure and build the parking lot.
I think that question's been asked and answered satisfactory. I can't even say the word, I'm so tired. It's all about the lower
corner.
Yeah.
So we've planted trees in the lower corner, and we have retaining walls. The retaining wall last month stopped at the end of the building. Now we've extended it 4 feet beyond the end of the building. So that effectively changes the elevation of the corner a little bit. And as we've shown on the previous view sheds that were submitted, that you really do not see much of the elevation when you're looking up North Malcolm.
So these are a series right there. The retaining wall that I'm seeing peek out at the lower corner there.
Drop down.
Drop down. That.
Yeah.
That's new retaining walls that are creating those galleys on that lower end of the site?
Yes. Well, they extend 4 feet beyond the building. They used to stop at the corner of the building.
But there's a series of those.
Well, there's a series of those that have been part of the project.
Yes, okay. And what is that material?
That is, ready block, I think it's called,
Ready Rock.
Ready Rock.
And
Which
what's-
is a retaining wall block that looks like it's cobblestone.
And how many feet is it from the edge of the road to the surface of the building, the facade of the building? Approximately.
The edge of the road to the face of the building?
Yeah.
That's on our chart, and I believe it was 25 feet. That's one of the variances we requested. There has been, no issue has been taken on it. It was,
Previously granted.
it was previously granted, and we kept it, we kept all the same variances for the, for this design.
Along with the stone at some point, I think we're gonna wanna see what
You want to see the stone on the side?
we're ready, well, I think, well, yeah, we wanna see it all, but I think we're fairly familiar with hardy, you know. or-
Yeah, it's hardy.
And, but the cultured stone and the ready rock.
Right. Okay. We have the landscape architect here to discuss landscaping, if that's an issue.
Well, I don't know if it's an
different?
issue, but we're interested.
Is it different?
Hmm?
Is it different from the
She has more information about the landscape than I do. I don't know if it's different.
That's why she's the
It's-
landscape
So you're just trying to
architect.
get the, you know, before and after version here.
Well, I think what we're doing is we're pulling the berm of the earth up, and then that will help compact the verticality of the building. So we're doing 2 terraces of a grove of trees. So that's a way that we'll get an elevation, a cascade of the plant material. Because if I were to only plant at grade, it's just gonna take much longer to bring the building into scale. But if we do a 2-tiered terrace, that'll help bring the building into scale, and it'll help create a verticality that I couldn't get on the lower ground plane.
Right. And it's a blended evergreen and deciduous.
In the front there, it's a deciduous grove.
When you say the front, you mean closest to the street?
Yeah. So we try and do a balance of evergreens and deciduous. There's reasons for this being that if I were to do only evergreen, it looks exactly the same year round. It doesn't have all the ecological benefits of a complete habitat. And if I were to do only deciduous, in the winter you have quite a barren landscape. So we're doing a pretty dense branching habit. Those are apple trees planted through there, which is a fairly dense branching habit as opposed to some other deciduous clippings that are a little more transparent.
Flowering apple.
Yeah, it will have a flowering in the spring, and it'll fruit, so it'll attract birds.
Oh, really?
We can get a non-fruiting, we can do a single gender.
Why do you say that? Well, I was gonna say, that sounds happy, but it
Yes.
doesn't sound so
It's
happy.
happy till they're all over the street.
All of them.
I don't think they'll quite, the birds will usually get to them before they form too much. We can, if it is a significant concern, you can do a single gendered.
I thought it sounded happy.
Free apples.
Well, that's the other question, is now, is somebody gonna maintain them? Because non-maintained apple trees would be pretty ugly.
Well, and non-maintained any plants can be an issue, so
I'm saying they get wormy, they get all kinds
the apple itself. Most often the birds get to anything before it develops. Any farmer will tell you that their greatest concern is the birds, and they're always netting their apple trees. So we would be lucky if we could get mature apples. It's unlikely though.
Okay. I mean, I don't have any objection, I don't think we them up. Okay. Anything else that's?
I don't think so unless you.
I'm Britt Zuckerman from Dirtworks, the landscape architect. Any other landscape?
What's next on the agenda here?
David, who's next? Are we done?
No, we have Anthony Russo from Environmental Compliance. And if you have any questions on the comparison document that was submitted to
People
you?
behind you. I don't have any.
submitted a similar type of document that the board appreciated in December.
We submitted a comparison document similarly to the document submitted when we compared the 120-bed facility to that of the 90-bed, the initial 90-bed facility. What we found was that there's, as in the past, we reduced impacts, cut and fill impacts have been reduced. The footprint, if you would compare the current proposal to that of the original, the footprint is 50% smaller, which is pretty neat. And a few other things, waste is less, 5% waste. Power, gas demands are less, slightly. And the demand for water is the same. We're still talking about 105 employees and 90 beds. The gross internal space of the currently proposed 90-bed facility is 77,801 square feet. And you compare that to the prior approved 92,440 square feet. It's a 16% drop, roughly 15,000 square feet. So that has bearing on overall on the scale and the mass of the building as well. As David had mentioned prior, the building had slid down the hillside a little bit. As a result, site design engineering is slightly different. It's positive. There's less cutting, there's less importation of fill, required significantly less to the result that 2.4 months of truck traffic, daily truck traffic will be reduced, which is a very positive thing for the project. That's less of a nuisance. Traffic is the same. Access to the facility from North Malcolm and Matilda is the same. And that's basically it. That's a summary of the table.
Great.
Okay.
That's it. Any questions that you have or public?
So we will wait.
My hope is that at that work session that I just mentioned before with the EAC, they will also have this. This is a much less involved thing for the EAC to look at. Dave's letter from July 23 effectively answers all the questions from the EAC. So, I would expect to get that recommendation very quickly from you.
I just wanted to mention or ask if the board is ready for a draft neg deck, if you're ready to receive that for the next meeting, just to kind of keep things moving and in consideration of the EAC's.
And we need that for the zoning board anyway.
That would be fun.
Okay, that'll work? Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. See you next meeting.
Okay. Is Maple Lodge here? Oh, Maple Lodge.
Nothing we submitted.
35 is next.
Good night, guys.
Oh, man.
Good evening, everybody.
How are you?
Mr. Sari is seeking site plan approval for 6 parking spaces for his property at 35 Crooklyn.
Did we do this before?
It was the issue with the leases at the other location, and I think that Gabrielle's going to go into that now.
Yeah, the parking spaces are located at 25 Crooklyn, which is boarding site, the sites are connected on one side. What we were discussing with Lynn before she left, she asked us to provide the leases with specifying the term of use. And she has recommended that we go for 10 years term.
Right.
And after 10 years, the client will decide if he will continue the use or discontinue the use. But the leases that he wrote to himself from one property to another are for duration of 10 years.
So the question we had the last time was that 25, the uses at 25 Croton Avenue, have to have adequate parking as well. So
Yeah,
you
yes,
can't-
they do.
So between the two sites, you have the right calculations?
I have 12 parking spaces, 6 for 25 and 6
And
for
that's what's
35.
required based upon the uses in the building?
Yes, they broke out the parking demand
Okay.
for, yes.
That's good, okay.
And I've looked at the lease, and it is,
That's okay.
as they say.
Is it a lease or a license?
It is parking space lease.
Okay. So that's good.
So at the end of the 10 years,
Somebody's got to set an alarm clock in the building department, other than that.
I'm sure we'll come back.
Yeah, probably. Well, let's wait for some of the younger ones.
Everybody.
They'll be here.
Okay, any questions from the board? Any questions from the public? If not, motion to approve site plan based upon the lease agreement. Jeff?
I'll second it.
Michael, second. All in favor? Aye. Carried. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you. Okay. Snow Avenue is cold, 185 North, 185 North Mountain Avenue.
They did not provide additional documentation.
Okay. 121 Main Street.
Also adjourned.
145. Okay, there's somebody.
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Planning Board. My name is Lucia Kyokyo. I'm with Cuddy and Fader, and we represent Cardinal McCluskey. I'm filling in for my colleague, Dan Laub. He thought maybe you were tired of seeing him through this process and asked me to step in. Actually, Dan is on a vacation, and Dan and I have been talking about this project, so he asked me to fill in for him this evening. Since the last meeting, we did make a submission. Cardinal McCluskey engaged the engineering services of Beatty Watson and submitted updated plans to address the comments in the comment memo. They also updated the landscaping plan. Happy to walk you through some of those comments and what was provided. I understand there aren't any additional comments.
Correct, yeah, we didn't do a new memo just because everything was addressed and it was pretty minor
This is the
parking
lease,
lot.
this is the lease arrangement?
Yes, for the, at .15.
Right, an easement, a recreational easement will be recorded on the adjacent parcel.
It's okay. Did you see the?
It looked fine.
Okay.
I reviewed it.
All right. Any questions from the board?
No, that makes sense.
Last.
is there something about the landscape? The change?
That was,
Yes.
that was the supplemental submission on July the 9th.
Yeah, species have been updated. I believe there are some invasive concerns. That's all been
Gotta stay away from the
taken care of.
Yes, we've got native species there now. A little bit of color.
Well, there was another comment, but I hesitate bringing it up now.
Oh, please.
Well, beyond the species, I mean, my observation was they're sort of equally spaced across the landscape. And the suggestion was rethinking perhaps modulating them in groups. That was a suggestion. So I appreciate the fact that the species were updated, but
It's still like the soldier.
it's the boing, 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 boing.
And we can certainly tweak that.
Modeled it in the field.
We can certainly tweak that, you know, if that's something that the board requests, perhaps a condition.
With our new planner in the field.
That's fine, and we're happy to do that.
Suppose you next Rose the conference. I'm thinking if I find geraniums in
I
my house, you
do,
would be pretty
but
upset.
perhaps in the, but still there's a, There's a pattern of life. It's not so rigid always.
Subtract that. Okay, so with that comment, you consider a more natural alignment of the plans.
Yes, and
We'll leave it
we're,
at that.
we're willing to work with the planner and be able to do that and get that a condition of approval.
Yeah, you can make that a condition of approval.
I think we did. Okay, so there, John is going to move this without condition, right?
So moved.
Second.
Walter, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you very much for your
You've accomplished a great
time.
mission for your colleague.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
He's
You
probably-
had to a long time.
It was me
for this.
behind the scenes the entire
He was
time.
probably thinking you should have sent you sooner.
Thank you very much, Butch. It's been a long time, but
3 hours prior of
That's
closure.
All right.
3 minutes
So that
of
takes
bliss.
care of 145.
Thank you, Jim.
and we'll provide the board with the easement.
Okay, great. 195 Main Street, a parking license. I don't understand what's happening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Bessio. I'm one of the owners of SMRR, and I have with me David Arango from Rui Ariano Associates, who's the architect. So just to sum up the application, we're the new owners of the property. We're going to be doing some interior modifications to demise the space into a multi-tenant use. The previous tenant, TNT, was there for 45 years. There is no file on this, so we have to create a parking waiver because 45 years ago they weren't doing parking waivers. So we're here to request a parking waiver for 24 spaces based upon 2 retail tenants and 2 office tenants occupying the same space that TNT was. There's no addition to the space. We have no on-site parking. The new tenants will have the same use of all the existing off-site parking facilities, which are shown on the map. And we are in the VC zone. We're looking at Chapter 270-30, Paragraph 812, basically stating that the parking space requirements shall be waived in the VC when the conditions I just mentioned are met. So I'm happy to walk you through the layout.
So we doing site plan too?
I believe it's all interior, the same kind of use. Maybe walk through the,
Sure.
what's there now, what the use will be?
So the entire space, lower level and main floor, was occupied by TNT. What we are going to be doing, which is what necessitated the waiver, we're looking to get a building permit for interior modifications to create a demising wall down the middle, some restrooms for each individual tenant, second means of egress out. We'll actually have less square footage than TNT did due to the addition of common egress, stairwells down, common hallways. However, we have no parking waiver on file. Upstairs, there's 4 one-bedrooms and 1 two-bedroom, which is shown in the chart for the parking calculation.
And they exist today?
Yeah. So that's how we got to the 24 spaces.
What's happening in the basement?
The lower level is proposed to be an office tenant with access from the roll-up door and the existing door outside. It would also serve a common stairwell to get up to the ground floor rear tenant, which is another office use. The space is very deep. It's about 150 feet deep. So the thought was to make the retail about 90 feet deep and create a maybe an accounting office or lawyer's office in the rear.
And they're gonna come in off the parking lot,
In the rear, there's a stairwell existing now with a door out to the loading dock that they would come in.
Okay. Big table. All right.
HPC is granted a certificate of appropriateness with regard to the exterior work.
We're gonna clean up the back.
Yeah, we'll clean up the back a little bit.
should just make, somebody should. Because I'm not so sure we're good neighbors back there either.
No.
Are we not being good neighbors? I think it's
No, not you.
pretty tidy there. Oh, okay.
No, I'm just saying, I think we should make sure our own house is clean back there.
The village has been doing a pretty good job with that area.
Good. You're right, camera, that's good. It's good to hear the constituency is satisfied. Okay, any questions from the board? Any-
No, I actually think introducing that use in the back, however challenging it may or may not be, is at least an incentive for you to be interested in everything looking sprucey back there.
That's good. I always thought it would be the great residential.
If there's an opportunity to work with the village to improve that area back there, I'd love to sit down with them and discuss opportunities.
Our new planner starts in a week.
Beautiful.
We're piling up work for her already. And she won't be bored. All right, any questions from the public? No questions from the public? Motion to approve the plan and the waiver?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
First that bill.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Hamill, Hamill Associates, representing the tenant. We are looking to get approval for a change of use from a restaurant to a indoor fitness franchise. It's in the PC district. Along with that, we'll be changing the storefront entry, which will need the approval from the architectural review board as well. We do have a, I'll go through it the boards here, if it's easier, whichever one is easier for the board to view.
So you're gonna have sort of a manager on site 24/7?
There is not a manager on site 24/7. No, the franchise model is a key fob system and 100% security in the gym area. We do panic buttons, we do lanyards, items like that for the after hours. The manager is typically on staff between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., but that can fluctuate depending on demand.
What's the name of the club?
It's called Anytime Fitness, is the franchise. It's a pretty popular, well-known franchise.
Okay.
So we'll be taking over 6,000 square feet that was previously the Hibachi restaurant in the Arcadian Shopping Plaza. So we did our parking study on the impact of the parking based on the calculations given to us from the landlord, and what we put together. There was no additional parking requirements that would be met. From there, we did an elevation study on the next slide.
You're not changing it.
No, well, the only thing is the storefront. So currently, the Hibachi has the storefront in the center of their frontage. We'll be moving that to the left-hand side, actually back to the original location of where that storefront was.
So you're gonna close that door, so glasses, and then you open the door?
Exactly. So we're going to be restoring the storefront to match the existing plaza and existing standards.
Okay.
And that's the extent. The last slide are some examples of the photos of the plaza and of the storefront itself.
And the hibachi thing comes down and the other one goes up in the center of the place, right?
Exactly. Yeah, pretty easy.
All right.
No impact on the.
No color changes?
Are the fish still in the interior pond?
No, they have been removed.
Oh, okay. So I'll come get them. Okay.
Any questions from the board? No? Wow. Any public? Sir?
Yes. So I live locally. I live right by the Arcadian Plaza. I'm Mark Oswald, also a local architect. I support the change of use and glad to see somebody going in that space. I do request that prior to Erstadt Biddle being able to lease any new spaces in that plaza, that they clean it up. The sidewalk in there is atrocious. The grease on the sidewalk outside of the very popular and very good Italian restaurant is hideous. I've seen a raccoon come through my yard with a dead rat recently. Just the general maintenance and upkeep of that property has really gone downhill, and I'd like to see it cleaned up prior to Erstadt Biddle being able to grant it any new leases. I think that'd be good for the tenants as well. So, but I do support the change of use, and I wish you guys the best of luck. And I like that it's a 24-hour business, because it'll, the more activity up there, the better. Because I've gone to Starbucks early in the morning, and I'm not sure what's going on in that parking lot sometimes. So the more activity there, the better. So anyway, that's my
first member.
That's my
first member. My name's Andre.
Andre, nice to meet you. So anyway, that's my comment from the public.
I agree.
Okay.
I've been down there.
Okay, so I'll take your comment. So, motion to approve the plan?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, so, I don't know, Jamie Stewart, can you tell?
What I'll do is I'll touch base with the building department on that, because I've been in contact with Erstadt Biddle regarding garbage on Revolutionary Road.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna say, this
I will
is
deal
a-
with that. This is ongoing.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years now, this is a pattern.
Yeah.
And I've noticed it too.
In the Shillmark Center, right outside CBS, there's a garbage can. One of those square things, filthy, all dripping down the side. I told the kid at the CBS 5 times, why don't you clean it up? He said, I can't, it's going to them. If I was the manager there, I'd get some cleanser. I just squirt it and clean it. Because it looks like CBS.
You're good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
What about 175 Kirkland?
That was adjourned, because they didn't give the proper notification.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes? Anybody was here last meeting? Jeff, second, first. Second, anybody second the motion?
The minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, please.
You got it?
All in favor? Aye. Carried. Motion to adjourn? Amen.
Yeah.
Somebody gonna send out a notice when we're gonna have the meeting?
Yes, he
We'll notice that publicly.
Okay. Thank you all for the night, for the gathering, we're done.